love it. Everybody gets quiet.
Yep.
That's what Mom said. Okay, we'll do it. The time is now 6 p.m. and we will call this meeting to order.
Please pray with me. Dear Lord, creator of all, we thank you for all we have and all we are. Please be with us tonight and guide us in your will. Though we all come from varied backgrounds and possess our own opinions, help us to set aside our wants and desires for actions that are in the best interest of the city and its residents. We ask for your protection during the approaching storm and for the current storm. Through Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
All right, everybody sees.
We have a new member.
I see that. Okay, let the record reflect. We have a new member on roll call, Miss Dina Pate. Thank you for being here. And we finally have a full bench. It was kind of vacant over here last week, so I'm glad to see everybody back.
You are alive.
Can you hear me, Paul?
Barely.
Okay, good.
Not tonight. So.
Chief, do we have any public comments, sir?
Capital improvement, no, sir.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let's move on to discussion and action items, which is A, presentation and discussion regarding the land use assumption and population projections presented by Strand and Associates. You have the floor, guys.
Good evening.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
I
Great.
type my notes. Hold on.
Okay, yeah.
Go through this?
Yes.
Pass it.
I appreciate you all being available. Tonight we've got a lot to go through, but I understand you've got a pretty packed meeting after this, and so someone might start kicking me if I go too long. The title for today's presentation is Draft Land Use Assumptions Fulfill Important Steps in the Impact Fee Development Process. My name is Ryan Tinsley with Strand Associates, and I'm joined today by Morgan Ruiz, who is also going to be giving a portion of the presentation, and Garrett Engelke, who is going to assist if you have any very, very tough questions. The agenda for today's presentation, we will briefly go over what an impact fee is. We will review the impact fee development process that has been prepared and will be implemented for the city's study. We will review the roles and responsibilities of the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee. That's all of y'all. And then the meat and potatoes of the presentation is to review the land use assumptions, to define what the service area will be, and to review service units. Towards the end of the presentation, we will solicit any feedback you may have on what has been pulled together to date and discuss next steps and answer any questions you may have. So what is an impact fee? This is a slide that I like to include on all of our impact fee presentations that we give. I think it helps for us all to work from the same basis of for what an impact fee is and how it can benefit a community. But the entire process to calculate, to assess, charge, and update impact fees is governed by the Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 395. So you'll hear us refer to 395 quite frequently. By definition, an impact fee is a charge or an assessment that's imposed by a city to generate revenue, fund, or recoup costs of capital improvements or facility expansions associated with new development. And 395 identifies that you can calculate impact fees for water, wastewater, roadways, and drainage. For purposes of this study, we are just going to be looking at water and wastewater improvements. Items that may be payable through collection of impact fees include construction costs, surveying and engineering fees, land acquisition costs, including the legal fees associated with that, and consulting fees to both prepare and update the capital improvement plans. Now, the next bullet is probably the most important bullet of the whole presentation. When we are calculating the impact fees, we can only consider the portion of the capital improvement plans that are attributable to new development over a period of up to 10 years. So what does that mean? There are many infrastructure projects that the city may wish to undertake, and I'm going to use two ongoing projects as an example. You've got the South Water Plant that is in construction right now, and the North Water Plant project that construction was completed a number of months ago. The South Water Plant project took booster pumps. There were existing booster pumps, suction and discharge piping, valves. It took all of that aging infrastructure and replaced it with new booster pumps, new suction and discharge piping, new valves. There was not an increase in capacity. That project was not constructed to serve any new development. So that's an example of a project that would not be eligible for reimbursement through collection of impact fees. By contrast, the North Water Plant is a brand new water well, a brand new ground storage tank, a brand new booster station. And the TCEQ defines the number of connections that each of those pieces of infrastructure can serve based on their capacity. And so that is an example of a project, and would be one we would include in the capital improvement plan, where you can recover costs for that project that's already been constructed. That project was likely constructed to serve a demand that also exceeds the 10-year window that we are allowed to look at. So 5 years from now, when you're doing another study update, that 10-year window is going to shift over, and you're going to be able to collect more impact fees to go towards paying off that project, which was constructed with the intent of serving future development. Now, the reason why communities adopt impact fees is that it lessens the burden of increasing utility rates and taxes on existing residents and employers or business owners that otherwise pay for such infrastructure improvements. So if you didn't have impact fees today, all of the infrastructure improvements that would be constructed in the city would be paid for by your ratepayers or by grants or other funding opportunities, but primarily by ratepayers. As things continue to get more expensive, rates would have to go up, taxes would have to go up. And now we're not saying that rates and taxes won't go up. We're just saying the extent to which it would is significantly less because you do have impact fees. Next slide. Impact fee development process provides multiple opportunities for input and comment. So this is the flow chart, the process that we will be using for the City of Richwood's impact fee study. It's a very interactive process where we are engaging with city staff, where we are engaging with you all as the advisory committee, and then also with the city council and members of the public when there's a public hearing. So I like to say, you know, this is not a study that we want to be doing in a vacuum. This is your all's study, so we want you to influence it as much as possible. Going through the steps in this process, step one is the formation of the advisory committee. That's already been done. You all are here today, and we appreciate that. Step two is the preparation of draft land use assumptions with assistance with city staff. And so we've already done that as well. We met with Eric and with Cliff just last week and reviewed what had been preliminarily pulled together and what we will be presenting to you this evening. Step three, it's bold and thick outline. That's where we are today. The presentation of the draft land use assumptions to the advisory committee. Step four, we will take any feedback that you provide, incorporate that into updated land use assumptions, and then we will prepare the draft capital improvement plans and calculate the maximum impact fees for water and wastewater. Step five is another presentation, very similar to this one, where we will present to you the projects that have been identified and the impact fees that have been calculated. And we will also show how those impact fees compare to what other communities are currently charging. Step 6 is to incorporate any additional feedback you may have. Step 7 is you are to make a formal recommendation to the City Council. This is per 395. Formal recommendation to the City Council at least 5 business days prior to the public hearing. Step 8 is the public hearing, where we will present, again, all of this information to you and members of the public. There is a public notice period of 30 days, so we'll need to take all of the documents that we pull together, post it likely on the city's website for 30 days, and then at the end of that, have the public hearing, and then step 9 is the adoption of the impact fee ordinance, or the amending of the impact fee ordinance, since you already have one. Next slide. Capital Improvement Advisory Committee responsibilities cover key aspects of the process and ensure appropriate documentation. So 395 does define a number of roles and responsibilities for the advisory committee. And during the study, the primary role and responsibility will be to recommend assumptions, capital improvement plans, and impact fees to the City Council. Once that is completed and the impact fee ordinance is amended, your responsibilities, which is pretty much here, you should get together, review the capital improvement plans. You should monitor the implementation of the capital improvement plan, file semi-annual progress reports where you're basically telling the City Council needs to update or revise land use assumptions, capital improvement plans, or impact fees, or that no update is necessary. So an example of that might be if things are continuing to develop in the way that we discuss this evening and in the future presentations, no update is necessary. But if a big development goes in across the street there, we may want to get together and do this again, because that's certainly a change in what we are discussing. Next slide, please. Appropriate development of land use assumptions deliver a strong foundation for the impact fee process. So 395 defines a land use assumption as a description of the service area and projections of changes in land uses, densities, and population in the service area over a 10-year period. Now we have a land use assumptions map shown on the right-hand side that we will talk about in greater detail on the next slide. But just in preparing this map, we work with city staff. We use the 2019 impact fee study previously prepared by others as a basis. We integrate known and anticipated future developments, and we incorporate population trends and density projections from state planning entities such as the Texas Water Development Board or the Houston-Galveston Area Council of Government, or the HGAC. Next slide. System-wide land use assumptions map defines the service area for water and wastewater improvement. So as I mentioned on the agenda, we have to define what our service area is. And 395 allows the service area to be system-wide. So for purposes of the study, the service area will be the city limits for the city of Richwood. Some cities choose to extend the service area out into the ETJ. Now you've got several communities that are pushing up against your city limits and into your ETJ, so that's not as easy. Also, if you were to extend it out into the ETJ, the makeup of this advisory committee might be just a little bit different. You'd have to add a couple more people. So the advisory committee, as it's been pulled together, meets the requirements of a service area extending to the city limits. So as I mentioned, we took the 2019 impact fee study maps, both existing and future, and compared those, using that as a foundation for our map here. The colors on the map denote different land uses, whether it be single-family residential, multifamily, commercial, etc. And those colors were updated based on new development since 2019. Lastly, we incorporated future development or denoted future development by adding a hatching. So you'll see future development areas hatched. It's kind of difficult to see there. We do have a map here printed out if you wanted to get a closer look at that, but I believe it may be in their packets as well. So with that, I will turn the presentation over to Morgan, who will talk a little bit about population projections.
So this is a breakdown of the table that's in your packet, but I'll go over that in a second. Population density assumptions reviewed to identify possible full build-out population. So from the land use assumptions map and discussions with city staff, we identified initial density assumptions. For estate single-family residential, it's assumed that one lot will be 4 acres. Currently, the only estate single-family residential in Richwood is Oakwood Shores, and they have an average lot size of 4 acres, so that's what we used here. Then for single-family residential, it's assumed that 3 lots will be in 1 acre. And then for mixed-use lots, it's assumed that 80% of its area will be single-family residential, and then the other 20% will be for commercial. Commercial properties don't add to the population, and so those are not counted into the population projections. And lastly, 2.3 people per household is assumed to convert the lots into population consistent with the average census data for Texas. Another aspect we have to consider in determining the amount of land being attributed towards population growth is that not 100% of the land in a residential neighborhood is for residential properties. You also have roads, streets, parks, sidewalks, drainage, other things in a neighborhood that are part of that land that are not necessarily where someone lives. So it's assumed that 52% of the land in a neighborhood or in a development for any development is 52% for the actual residential lots, and then 48% for those other features. Using these initial density assumptions, let's take a look at a population density example for a mixed-use development. Oh, not
yet.
So say you have a 100-acre lot for a mixed use, taking 80% of that for residential, that's 80 acres. From those 80 acres, 52% is part of those residential lots, and then multiplying that by 3 for the single family, and then the 2.83 for the population to household factor. You have a growth in a 100-acre lot for mixed use of 353 people, adding to the population of Richwood. Yeah, you can too. State planning methodology replicated in preparation of land use assumption population projections. So from this graph, you can see there's various methodologies used to project population growth. No one knows for sure how the population is going to grow. Everyone has different ways to calculate. Two agencies that calculate the population for Richwood are TWDB, or Texas Water Development Board, and HGAC, which is the Houston-Galveston Area Council. And both of those are shown on here. They calculate for both Brazoria County and Richwood. And so looking at the graph, the purple and the purple and orange are the county growth. We assumed that Richwood would grow at the same rate as the county, and that's just a straight percentage taken from those two agencies' county population. And then looking at pink and green, those are the direct populations that those two agencies determined for the city. You can actually see that the pink line for HGAC shows the population of Richwood decreasing, which we don't really love for impact fees because that kind of defeats the purpose of why we have impact fees. And then the next column shows is based on historical census data from 2015 to 2020. The steady number in blue is just the average number per year over those 5 years that Richwood grew, and that's just continued forward through the 20 years. And then the steady percent in yellow shows the average percentage every year carried throughout the next 20 years. And then lastly, the red maroon dashed line is the LUA, which correlates directly with the map and how city staff think that the city is going to build out. So there's 3 main areas that affect population growth. There's Oakwood Shores, and then there's this northwest area, and then there's this big eastern development. And so from those, these areas of development haven't changed from the previous impact fee study, but the population projections for those have. In the 2019 study, it was estimated that in 2029, you would have a population of 9,500 people. You can see in the graph here that at 2029, you have between 7,000 and 7,500 people, depending on which methodology, still way less than the 9,500 people.
So I have a question about your percentage assumptions.
Yes.
Is there data to support your using the same percentage growth for Richwood versus the county? I just feel like that should be drastically different.
Yes, it is. So for the data for those counties, it shows actually pretty consistent between 1 and 1.25 for both HGAC and Texas Water Development Board, which is slightly higher than the census historical data of about 1.1, I think, 1.2. And so those two are similar, but still slightly different.
Okay, maybe I phrased the question wrong. The percentage of Richwood growth versus the percentage of county growth.
Yes.
So you said earlier that those percentages are the same rate of growth?
For the, I guess, what, can
You
you,
can take this.
yeah.
So the HGAC county and Texas Water Development Board county, that is a step down, and it considers what percent the city of Richwood is to the county today.
Okay,
So as the county grows, it keeps that same percentage for Richwood. Does that answer the
it
question?
does, yep.
So it is, you retain your same percentage of the county as you have today. But there may be different areas of the county that are gonna grow faster or slower.
Yeah, absolutely, than Richwood.
It's just another metric to kind of gauge. It's probably the ceiling, it's probably on the high end.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of where does the city fall in that 10-year period? Where do we think it falls? It's definitely not above that, right?
No,
It's
yeah.
probably somewhere between that high number and somewhere between the low numbers. It's not an exact science, but it's kind of just, it's somewhere in there. And that's
Okay.
that's what you're all here for today. That was help us determine that.
All right.
And then another thing to consider in looking at this map is, so HGAC and TWDB they last did projections in 2020. So in 2024, they projected something lower than the actual population in Richwood. And so both of those, we kept the same trend line, just moved that up to match the current population number. So then going back to the LUA line, we assume that Oakwood Shores would grow by 10 lots per year over the next 20-year outlook. The Northwest Development Area would grow by 5 lots per year for the next 10 years, at which point it will be completely built out. And then the East area would grow by 5 lots per year starting 5 years from now and keeping those 5 lots per year for the next 20 years. So with all 3 of these developments growing at the same time, you would have 20 lots per year being added to the city, or about 57 people added to the city. And so for that line, for years 1 to 5, Oakwood Shores in the northwest area is growing. For years 5 to 10, all 3 development areas are growing. And then from years 10 to 20, only Oakwood Shores and the eastern development would be growing. Next slide. Incorporating CIAC feedback improves confidence in impact fee study. So this is your opportunity to review the map and provide feedback on it and the population projections, and select which method of the population projections you expect that the city to have, and because the 10-year percentage really is what is most important, because that's what we use for the rest of our calculations. As Ryan said, only the first 10 years can be calculated for impact fees. And so while the following 10 years is important, we really want to know what you think that 10-year number is. So any comments or feedback or questions from y'all?
No.
Was the question, what do we think the next 10 years will be?
Yeah.
I didn't bring my crystal ball, unfortunately.
Can you click back to the graph? So, Mayor and Council, if you look, when we met with them the other day, I think we have the same issue. We don't know what, it's like projecting a budget 20 years from now. We don't know. But if you look at the dashed line in between the green and the blue, that is an assumption on our part that that's probably going to be in the ballpark, somewhere between the green line and somewhere between the blue line. And I think that's a safe assumption on our part, that looking back on the data that we have, that's a realistic goal to shoot for as far as our land use assumption goes. Yes, it is possible somebody could buy that entire thing over there and boom, it goes. But, right now, we have to base it on what we see and what we feel is best. So, in our meeting, the discussion that we had was that's probably where we lie.
Do we know what was the percentage we grew in the last 10 years?
Yeah, do you have the 2020 numbers that you can compare to this current graph? Because you said it was higher, right, than what it actually is?
The projection was higher.
It was,
The projection was lower. Yes.
Right.
Oh,
So we had-
Earlier you said higher.
That's what I thought.
So
Oh, yes, the 2019 study that had a higher number of 9,500
we didn't meet that.
at 2029, which
Yeah.
is more than in 20-year build out for any of these projections that we have.
I just kind of wanted to see what the graph was showing, what you had in 2020 versus what you have today.
Oh,
The last one probably looked more like the counties.
I mean, just from a,
Can we have, so since this is feedback for the next session, can we have a projected versus actual graph?
yes.
That way we can
Okay.
see, it'll be easier for us to tell how far off we were
Because you'll just
based
adjust
on the
it,
assumptions
but
from the last.
we can see where it
Like, what
came
was our
from.
population when we did the first impact fee study to where we are now? That's what they're asking. The actual population.
it was at 51, about 5,100 was the estimated population. I think it was a growth rate of about 6.5%. But council needs to keep in mind that was a little bit skewed in 2019 or 20. With the explosion of the population due to the 2 apartments, we saw a 32% population increase. So we battled through that because it really threw the whole thing off. So just establishing a growth rate or something that everybody was comfortable with was a challenge. We kind of omitted that single year from these projections here, which I think is going to make it far more realistic than what those first projections were when we implemented the fees.
I think that one of the things that I overall see about Richwood is, they're building 288. The other day I drove up to downtown Houston at 4 o'clock in the morning. It took me 45 minutes. But then on an average day, to drive to close to that, it takes me about an hour. I think that the finishing of that 288 is going to be a significant difference. That 15 minutes is huge whenever it's a drive to work every day for Houston. But another way to look at it is, you know, what jobs are here, you know, that's going to really be impactful on how many, whether we grow or not, is whether there's jobs here. I don't know if it's the appropriate time to say it, but I think that's probably one of the focuses that we need to be looking at it as we move forward, is where are people going to work, you know, and some of this land could possibly be those opportunity areas.
Are there any parts of the study that's done as, because I think over the past 5 years, there's been so many just in jobs, but you see a mass exodus of people getting out of inner city, so they're going more to suburbs and further away, so things of that nature. Also, over the past 5 years, you have to look at, you know, interest rates. So more people bought homes, more people, you know, left the apartments or whatever, and all that good stuff. So, is how you take into account all of that. Granted, we can't foresee the future as far as interest rates and the economy and things of that nature.
You only do it to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
And things like what Mr. Challenger's talking about, what you're talking about, I think you have to consider timelines that it would take to have projects like what Mr. Challenger's talking about to get completed, to start seeing impacts like that. You know, this will be reviewed in another 5 years. So all we can do is just take the data we have right now with the available property we have and take a best guess on how that will, or how soon that will develop out. And, you know, base it off of that.
Right.
You can definitely hypothetical yourself to death. But we can only take the data we have and work with that.
Yeah, and I just think it's good. I think going forward with this, we definitely need something from the past to kind of compare to what we're looking at.
Yeah, kind of link
Yeah.
it.
Jared?
I don't
And
know,
these
probably
agencies,
crazy.
like BGC and Texas Water Development Board, that's what they do. I mean, they're basing their projections on industrial, commercial growth, and then the population that will follow that. And they're wrong sometimes.
Right.
Historically, we've seen Texas Water Development Board like significantly underestimates population growth, but
The formula is the same.
seems like HGAC is doing a better job as of late, kind of keeping up with the trends in the growth patterns. Yeah, I mean, it is
That's our problem.
Yeah, I mean,
We
well,
need
the
a
last 5
basis
years,
for what was
it's
before.
you could almost say an anomaly because you had such a mass exodus from
I need to
the
know
West
what was
Coast,
before.
from the East, and just
Versus
a
what they're
lot of
using
things
now.
came in to Texas in general. So it's,
And I think I'm picking up what you're saying, Jeremy, is that, you know, this is our first review
Right.
of the impact fees, and seeing those also in line with each other, the initial impact fees, what we're projecting, for the first review and so on and so forth.
right.
So you can see them understand what you're saying. So
the growth may slow down, but it may not. So,
Right.
when we're going through these studies, oftentimes it's prudent to overshoot, I guess, than undershoot. Just because if you undershoot, then you're behind, and that's a problem. I was watching the news a couple days ago, where ERCOT is estimating that by 2034, there's going to be double demand on the grid that there is today. So that's people coming in. I don't know. They're seeing it. They're not projecting that growth is going to slow down significantly.
And growth compounds,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, 8 billion turns into 16 billion real quick.
Definitely.
I mean, me personally, I'm mostly concerned about having a place for these people to work, you know, jobs, and I'm looking at this map thinking that we need to pick out some places for some industry. Me personally, I went out to Long Beach, California the other day. Me and my kid took a train ride out there just for fun. And, you know, it was a major port city, and we're the gateway to the port, as we call ourselves. You know, one thing that I noticed around there was distribution centers. I just see that there possibly could be a need from an industrial standpoint as we grow Freeport as distribution places for the cargo that gets offloaded. They get it off the ship as quick as possible and then to a distribution place. That potentially could be good jobs for a lot of people.
I think is that the point of the mixed use across the highway? Is like that could potentially be
Yeah,
that,
that's
what
what I
you're
was
looking
gonna
for?
tell Mr. Turner. We tried to take that into consideration with the mixed use you see on the map, which is the brown color.
That's the only place to go.
But, that's really what you guys are here for, is to make recommendations on that. Now, the reason you have an 80-20 split is because we're assuming that everything that's gonna be TxDOT frontage is gonna be commercial property as it is on the other side of 288 business and on 2004. So we're using that as kind of a base model. But if, mixed use and wanted to assume something, maybe a 70-30, I guess, it would change, but it would change
It's a
everything that you
controversial subject, because, you got trucks and industry, and some people are gonna want, the sleepy city, and some people, that's definitely a controversial and
Right.
thing, but
But, with the interest we've had in that property and in other properties, like I said, we can just take what data we have and make our best assumption of what the best use of that property would be. And it might change, another 5 years when we review, it might change again, but that's definitely why you guys are here tonight, to give feedback.
And we didn't highlight it because it really doesn't affect the population, but on the, trying to think here, west side of 288B, there's a number of red tracks there that are hatched where it's expected that there will be some sort of commercial or industrial development. Thanks, Vanna. It doesn't really affect the population numbers, but, it is jobs that would potentially drive up that residential. So, I kind of think for purposes of today's presentation, so that we can move forward with the study and start identifying projects and getting costs together, because the intent is the next presentation that we give, we're presenting to you all of the projects, and then this is what the impact fee calculated out to be that far along, is to look at, Kirsten, could you go back to that one right there? So we've got 3 residential areas identified, and I wonder if we could come to some sort of concurrence on, the number of additional lots per year. This was kind of the exercise that Cliff and Eric and, we sat down last week and ran through, and we looked at Oakwood Shores, and you said over the last handful of years, we've added how many lots per year? Has it been about 10?
About the average, yes.
On
that just
average?
turned on 2 years ago, though, really. I mean, within the last 2 years when it,
Well, we saw a 14 lot development spike for 2 years in a row, which would have been 20 and 21, and then it dropped. So it didn't keep going up or hold during the 2021 times when we saw the spike. And that averaged out over 5 years, we see about 10 lots.
I have a question though, why look at it from how many lots you add per year? Because if I look at it, I'm gonna say, okay, well, there's 100 acres. Well, I have to build an infrastructure that can sustain that 100 acres, whether I put 50 lots or 100 lots in it.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
this is just simplifying it.
Okay.
I think thinking of it in terms of 1 year, the infrastructure is going to be constructed like the North Water Plant to serve some future demand, not just 10 years out, but 20 or even 30 years out. You're constructing infrastructure to serve a full build-out of that development.
Right.
But we need to, it all comes down to water meters.
So
Water
how many
meter,
connections?
a water meter is the service unit.
Okay.
So your impact fee is charged based on the number of connections and the size of those connections. So if we can agree that Oakwood Shores, the current trend of 10 lots per year is gonna continue for the next 10 years, well, that's 100 lots. That's
If you're
100
saying 10 lots, you mean 10 new additional homes?
10 new additional.
Because there's no new lots in there. It's just 10 new homes being
New
built.
homes.
New
Correct.
homes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
New connection.
Connections.
Okay,
The empty
that's
lots
what I
don't
was-
have
10 new
connections.
connections.
Perfect,
Yeah.
okay. I didn't know where these new lots were popping up.
And you're also saying the average
I'm sorry.
is 4 acres, is, like you said, on the Oakwood Shores, it's more like 2,
I would say 2, if I had to guess.
Okay.
1 or 2.
So I guess, you know, the benefit for Oakwood Shores is that it's already platted, the lots are already there.
He's just saying
10 new
new
connections.
homes
So
to be built.
using that helps us get to the number, because keeping in mind that the ultimate goal of this is to make sure that we are capturing those fees to develop these properties, or not to pass along it to all of the taxpayers at all. So using that chart right there, by how many assumed new properties we have going in, then we pass that, that's how we set that fee. If that makes sense to you, it's a simpler, in my mind, it's a simpler way to get there.
And we're saying 10 lots per year for the next 10 years in
I think
Oakwood
you
Shores?
said 5.
Or 5?
20.
20 years.
We don't have that many lots in Oakwood, do we?
How many
Yeah,
vacant lots
244
remain in
vacant
Oakwood
lots.
Shores?
Okay.
How many did she say? I missed that.
Yeah, you have
Yes.
about 240 remaining
Okay.
that can be developed.
Okay.
Yeah. As long as we don't replat them all.
My only concern I had was,
We
so
will.
looking at that right there, so it's 100 acres.
I'm
I
doing
got it, okay,
Every
so
now.
you said 80% of that would be residential use, because the other 20 would be commercialized. And then you took 52% of that 80 is so 48% would be considered roads and infrastructure. That seems like a lot, I don't know.
Roads,
It just-
drainage,
Detention.
parks,
Yeah, it
detention.
does seem like a lot, but if you look at it, and
Just,
actually, yeah.
speaking from
Yeah,
seeing builders, they wanna put houses, I mean,
Well, yeah.
they're putting them
They-
right on
they
top
do,
of another.
And that's
you
for
know?
concentration as much as they can.
Right.
We have minimum lot widths here, in Richwood, but if you were to look at something like that on maps, I think you'd be very surprised.
It's-
And it would hit you right away, that with streets, sidewalks, drainage, retention, any parks, you know,
Yeah.
anything else but the actual foundation and house.
Foundation,
Yeah,
okay.
it's, yeah.
So when you take the square foot of a foundation, then that's kinda how you get it. I think.
Basically, every part of that lot just serves that
Okay.
developed house, yeah.
Yeah, we've looked at a number of developments in different communities, and that percentage or right around there is held pretty true for various sizes of developments.
Right.
So I guess back to Oakwood Shores, do we think 10 per year makes sense? 10 connections?
Well, what I heard is 4 years ago, between 2 years,
20,
over 2 years'
21.
time, we had 14 developments
Each.
Is
that what I heard?
Per year,
per year.
yeah, over 20 and 21.
And then it tapered off by how
Yes.
much?
Half.
Half,
As
okay.
interest rates went up. it
Right.
tapered off.
Yeah.
You're talking 6, and see, this is another thing that we try to look at, to the best of our ability, is the economic climate.
Yeah, too bad we can't do this after November.
And-
Amen.
But, you know, try to make our best guess. And, you know, these projections are for a long period of time. So
Yeah.
to say, keep in mind, this has to be reviewed every 5 years too.
Mhm.
We want to get as close as we can, but we want to try to make sure we're being as accurate as we can with the information we have now, and only what we can see into the future. So you can really keep yourself up at night
Yeah.
for things like this, but, you know, we can only tell you that.
Yeah, and again, since you're monitoring this and meeting twice a year, you know, if something happens that we did not expect, that would be great reason to revisit this at that time. Like if someone purchases the tract or develops the tract on the other side of 288B and, you know, just starts developing like crazy, you would definitely want to come back and go through this process again and identify projects needed to serve a much, much greater development over there than what we are currently projecting.
Was your study more focused on that red or the brown on that map? Because I have no, y'all keep referring to that property across the street, but I've never heard of anybody gonna purchase it.
So that's what we're referring to as the east development. At this point, we are not expecting anything to occur over there in the next 5 years.
Okay.
And then after that 5 year, I'm correct in saying that, right? Okay. After that 5 year period, we are expecting just 5 lots per year for years 6 through 10. So we're just talking 25 connections in the next 10 years over there.
Possibly 25.
Possibly 25 connections.
But by then, we'll
That
never
may
do
not
this
even
again.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause I didn't know if y'all had some inside info.
No, we
Y'all keep
don't.
referring to that. and I'm
No,
like,
not
Wish we did.
Yeah.
That'd make this a whole lot
That's why we can't
easier.
even tell you what
And
it's gonna
it's
be.
basically established a projected percent of development over a period of time. It was pretty aggressive, we thought, when Freeze and Nichols initially did it for council. The CA at that time initially gave their
Yeah.
feedback, but yeah, based on what we've seen now, we backed that up, especially with that particular property you're talking about, Mayor, that the development's gonna be far slower. And the percent.
Fine with me.
Yeah, that's, I mean, the amount of connections are based on percentage of growth of the available property that we have over that 20-year period.
Shouldn't be too many connections over there right now.
I think the numbers they have is pretty close. I'd go with it for now, and if anything changes over the next 6 months, then you can revisit,
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the growth assumptions. I need a basis. I need a comparison. I need the
Before and after?
percentage for the last study versus the actual, for the next review. That would help me a
I
lot.
would think that we could provide
Yeah,
that, like,
I
kind of in the interim. and-
Yeah, I think
Okay.
my menial skill.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, you had the map on the last agenda, but not a chart like this, so.
Yeah.
We want a pretty chart.
Okay.
Well, if you all are, generally agreeable with what we have assumed, and that is, pretty much this map, the service area being the city limits, and the number of residential connections being the 10 per year in Oakwood Shores, the 5 per year for years 6 through 10 on the east side of 288B, and then the 5 per year in the multifamily up in the northwest part of the city. And that's just the first, is that 10 years?
That's being fully built.
Fully
in
built
10
out in
years.
10 years. So if you're good with that, we can start identifying projects needed to serve those areas, and assuming that that level continues further out in the future, we can identify projects needed to serve those development areas, and be prepared to discuss draft capital improvement plans and have some impact fee numbers for you at the next meeting. Of course, that'll have a comparison with all the other communities, your neighboring communities.
I can't speak for the other communities, but I'd say it sounds about accurate for Oakwood Shores. So, from what I've seen.
Well, Dina would know best.
Yeah, I was trying to count in my head how many, I've seen, but I guess 10 is a lot. I mean, so, because I was thinking maybe the number might be higher, but that's probably about right.
And to give a little bit of history, it's pretty consistent, since 2012, over that period of time. We've seen some spikes, some highs and some lows, but fairly consistent, 8 to 10 lots per year. It's been kind of, we've seen over the past 12, 13 years.
Well, it's one of the more desirable neighborhoods now that people want to live in, because you're, 5 minutes from everything, and we didn't flood. So that might be in 2021, we just had the 16 and 17 flood. Good. Everything else had water.
I think there was some incentive money going out at that time too. That might have something to do with it.
Well, they didn't have any roads either, so.
Oh, yeah, we got the roads. Whenever we got promise of roads, that was a big
High-speed
thing.
internet too.
Something to do with it, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Amanda.
You're welcome.
That was
Feel better
helping a
now.
lot.
So then, I just quickly looking at next steps, so today was the first CIAC meeting. The next one will be on July 8th, where, as Ryan said, we'll go over the impact fee amount and the capital improvement plan projects. And then by August 12th, you will need to make the formal recommendation to yourselves as city council. And then the August 12th, you will have the public hearing, and then in the city council meeting session, you will approve the first reading, and then later in August, you will need to approve the second meeting. Per 395, there's a certain day window that those two have to be within each other, and if you wait till the next month's council meeting, that would be too far. So, are there any other questions?
Yes. So on a historical basis, y'all studies, plus or minus, how many percentage is your studies off or right on based off your research and what you're predicting for the future?
That's a good question.
What's your win rate?
I'm gonna hold you to the fire here.
I'm trying to think about how I'm going to answer this one.
Should ask that first.
You know, much like you all, and maybe even to a lesser degree, because we don't live here, we don't work here, so we don't understand the growth to the same degree that you all do. We have to lean on feedback from you all, feedback from city staff, and also information from the HGAC and the Texas Water Development Board. And I think one of the things that kind of stuck out, I know Eric, you mentioned at the meeting that you felt like that red dashed line was much more in line with what it should have been, the previous study overestimated. Now certainly if there were apartment complexes going up all over the place, then that number of connections may have been more accurate. And then you also mentioned that you felt like the correct area was within the blue and the green lines, and that once we sat down and went through the exercise of 10 lots per year, so on and so forth, that's where it ended up. So I'm hesitant to say, and to be honest, we don't really even revisit that stuff until 5 years later. So if you ask me that question 5 years from now, maybe I can give you a better answer.
I'm just looking for a historical basis, because most people want to be as close to exact as possible, you know.
The level of development that the communities that we serve, and we're up, our office is out in Brenham. We serve a lot of small, medium-sized community on the periphery of Houston. There is a lot of growth going on up there. And I'll tell you that the planning entities, they are way undershooting what's going on up in that part of the world. It is difficult for anybody to estimate what is going to happen anywhere at this time with the level of development that we're seeing.
Sure.
And so I would have to go back and look at some numbers to be able to
Are you
accurately
pretty
answer your
close,
question.
or are you far off?
I feel like we're
Any guess?
I feel like we're fairly close.
Really close.
I feel like we're fairly close.
That's good in guessing.
That's good at guessing.
That's what this is.
I know.
That's really what this is.
It's a
And so,
guess.
yeah, I mean, our role in this
You
is
saw the
just to
Dorothy Stood
present.
at the board, huh?
That's fine. I just didn't know how close you guys get on average with your projections.
Yeah. It really only matters if it is significantly different to the point you have to start adding more projects. We're looking at this from a number of connections. We make an assumption for how many connections will be added in a 10-year period. That feeds into the equation where you calculate the maximum assessable impact fees. But if more development occurs, you're not adding more projects to it, you're just taking impact fees that would have been paid in years 10 to 15 or 15 to 20, and you're moving that forward and paying off those projects much earlier.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a hard time answering that question, what's gonna happen.
Just a number is all I was looking for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know, I get it.
And try to keep in mind the purpose of the process. And also keep in mind that as exact as we want to be, that if we do see any drastic change, there's always the ability to come back and review this within short notice if we needed to. So yeah, we want to get as close as we can be, but you know, we always anticipate that things can and will change, and we try to account for that to the best of our ability within these projections. But if something's drastic, we'll look at it again.
Plan for the best.
Yep.
So, I appreciate it. You got to drive all the way back to Northwest Houston tonight?
Right.
Yes.
Goodness gracious.
Making that toll road money.
College Station.
And Brenham is part of Houston now, right?
It's quickly becoming that.
We're getting close too.
Yeah. Any other questions?
That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
We're going. It's one.
So they've already gone over the future agenda,
Mayor, can I
items, so we
have
don't need to
just a
discuss
second
that.
before we transfer to the other meeting?
Go ahead.
Can I have just a second?
One.
I mean, is it related? Because it's not agenda.
Already getting involved.
Oh, yeah, I mean, when we adjourn,
Get into the next one.
We're not adjourned yet.
We're not adjourned.
When we're adjourned, you can.
There. Okay, the time is now 6:55 and no other agenda items on this first one. Meeting's adjourned.
All right, thank you.
Now,
Zach and Lynn.
Thank you, guys.
Thank y'all.
Safe travels home.
Philip coming today?
no. But I'd like to at least get through public comment real quick, because Ms. Kissinger's been waiting for me. Over there.
Well,
I know, but I
what
have to,
happens when you don't call us in?
well, I had it set at 6:20, so that's why she's here.
Well,
And we're just-
Well, your buddy here wanted one. All right, the time is now 7:02 and we'll call our second meeting to order. All council members are present for this one. Do we have any public comments for this one, Chief? All right, we finally do. I get a piece of paper with some writing on it. Mrs. Kissinger.
Yes. I live on 136 Sycamore, and so my street, you know, it's solid down this way, but there's a court street that comes right in front of my house, and I can't tell you how many people, I've lived there 11 years, how many people have gone in my ditch and just rutted up, because they run the yield sign, and what I thought of, there's a stop sign that lights up. They have one somewhere in the city that lights up. People would see it, because if we just put a regular stop sign out, they're not going to look at it. It's not going to do anything. Unless I thought about this, a yellow sign, you know, that says, you know, just you're going to have to turn left or right. You know, it says straight, you know, because they just go. I'm telling you, and then they come out through my yard.
So
Yeah.
We can't talk back.
okay. I just was trying to get a better
I know,
understanding.
but we can't have discussion.
we're not allowed to have discussion
Oh.
in public comment.
Oh,
We
okay.
can only have discussion if it's on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
So we can hear you. We just
Oh,
aren't,
okay.
by law, we can't offer any feedback
Oh, no, I know,
at this
that's
moment.
fine. I'm just wanted to let y'all know that it's been a problem, and my neighbors, well, I mean, there's been people that get caught in there, like during the storm. There was a storm one night, and this guy was in the middle of the night driving, didn't have windshield wipers on, and went down into my ditch, and my neighbor across the street pulled him out, and then we have a tow company truck over on the other side, catty-corner to my house. They pull people out. And it's just been a mess, you know. I just like to see something done. Because if I was out there at work and in my yard, you know, they don't slow down. They don't slow down because I mean, I'll be out there working and, you know, doing stuff in the ditch, and they're just, you know, so And that's another issue, that they're just speeding down Sycamore, both ways. I'm in the middle and they're kind of just flying. I want somebody to drive 25 miles an hour past my house, see how fast that is, because these people are just flying. So
if they come off Cypress Court towards your house, you're saying they're going across and hitting your ditch?
they're crossing the street and going down into my ditch.
Okay.
And I have big ditches. They're like 6 feet. They're big ditches.
Okay.
I mean, even I think that y'all had to replace the sewer thing because somebody, it was the garbage man backed into it. He slid into it. I saw him do it. I was like, oh, God. And he was way up in the air. So, and he was full. So they had to get several trucks to get him, tow trucks to get him out. I mean, and people just fall in my ditches all the time. My little driveway. Don't go in that little driveway. I swear. Go in the big one by the mailbox, because I know how to get in it, but my dad's falling, Bugman's falling. I mean, people fall in it all the time.
Okay.
And there's, stuck. So.
I think we'll take a look into that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
very
your
much.
comments.
All right, thank y'all so much.
Thank you so much.
ma'am.
It's nice
Bye-bye.
meeting you.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
That would be kind of wild to see a trash truck. It's the only reason I was laughing. Okay, that's all the public comments we had. Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda, budget report, May 2024. B, approval of minutes from regular meeting held May 13th, 2024. Approval of minutes from regular meeting held June 10th, 2024.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second. Second.
Third, fourth, and fifth. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let the record reflect, the motion carries. Okay, moving on. Fiscal year 2025 budget workshop.
Okay, did we want to do a quick recess? I had got pizza delivered, so if y'all want to get something to eat before we get to talking.
Absolutely.
First slide.
I'm unmuting.
They all ready?
Hold on.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, Mayor, Council, I appreciate the opportunity to come together tonight to talk about planning and budgeting. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of our local budget and our local economy, I think it's incumbent upon me to proffer a little bit of a speculative guess at what drives our economy and what I think will happen in the near future. And I want council to specifically focus on a couple of things and consider moving forward in our budget and our budget process. One of the things that has kind of upset me is listening to past council talk about our reserves and how our reserves have grown and we shouldn't be growing a reserve, and we shouldn't be doing this, and we shouldn't be doing that, yet we came from a place where we didn't have a reserve. And we did not have a replacement fund, and we did not have planning for the future. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to watch our dollars and to watch them closely if you want to have a solvent and functioning city. That said, these are the things that I think we're looking at in the near future. I want council to think about the key economic indicators that our economy may not be in good shape. And if you take your news from NBC, CBS, or ABC, or your local CNN, or whatever else the case may be, I don't believe you're getting a big picture. And I think it's incumbent upon us to be the financial stewards of our money. Right now, we've got some indicators that our economy is not in good shape, and I don't mean a recession. I mean a little bit worse than that. We've got an increasingly volatile stock market. I don't know how many of y'all have money in the stock market, but you're riding some wicked highs and some wicked lows, and you're kind of all over the place. There is decreasing consumer confidence. And what I mean by that is if you look at your CEOs of your big box stores. Home Depot is one, and a few others have Walmart is another, who has said, red flags. There are bad things happening. You look at your top 6 or 7 billionaires in the world, they've all dumped massive amounts of stock in the last 30 days, more than ever in history. We have an inverted yield curve, and basically what that means is in that little box at the bottom there is interest rates for the near term, a 3-month or 1 month, is 5.49, 5.49. The 30 years paying 4.59. And what happens when you invert that yield curve like that is you're trying to flush money into the economy now. That means we're on fire. That means something bad is happening. When you reinvert, you pay longer term. With a 30-year note pays much more than a 1-year note. That's a sure dedicated sign. Every time this has happened in our economy, we have been in a recession or worse. We've been that way for a while. Next slide, please. Household debt rose by $184 billion in the first quarter. That's not because people are buying things. It's because they're paying their debt with credit cards. They're paying debt with debt. That's not good. Auto loans delinquent by 90 days or more, 4.4%. That is insane. That is absolute insanity. 4% of all cars sold are being repoed. That number's just going up and up and up. Next slide. Look at the trend line that we're following. So, mortgage debt through the roof, home equity and through the roof, auto loan through the roof, credit card through the roof. Student loans.
What do you know? Still on there.
Student loans going down. Others in total. So basically what I'm seeing is some not so good things. Next slide, please. I don't know how many of y'all know that we are no longer the sole petrodollar anymore. Saudi Arabia, that agreement just ended. It was a 75-year, 50-year agreement. That means that the petroleum is now traded in all currencies. So what does that mean for the U.S. dollar? That means that the U.S. dollar is no longer the reserve of the world. That means about 3% of all petroleum dollars that were made, we got that portion. We do not get that anymore. That's hundreds of billions of dollars no longer there. Next slide. Housing market. I don't know how many of y'all plan to buy a house, or you have a family member or friend who's buying a house right now, but they're going to pay about double what we did when we bought our homes. And a large majority of that is going to be in your interest payments. Not good, folks. It's not good. Next slide. The debt to GDP ratio. So that means the amount of products we sell and manufacture, make in the United States. When you get to, right now we're at the 97% mark. So that means 97%, it's unsustainable. And it's projected to be, by 2034, it's going to be 116% negative debt to GDP. So our debt is going to outweigh what we produce. It already is. We're at 100% right now. So it's going to far surpass that. If you're looking at a slide of the United States economic situation, it is this right now. Straight down. Just the bearer of bad news. I'm just telling you, I wish I could impart to you how important our budget is and how important our reserves are and how important every single dollar we spend is. And I don't mean that in an alarmist rate, but we see some things that are not good, and it is incumbent upon me to bring that to you. All right, next slide. So this is a little older picture, but this is straight from the Congressional Budget Office. That's your revenues and outlays. Remember when we talk about the budget, I tell you if those lines ever cross, you're in bad trouble. Those lines cross for the United States in about 2000, and it's separating. So these are not good things, folks. These are not good things. Next slide. So my advice, ultimately, when we bring a budget to you, I'm responsible for bringing you a balanced budget. I'm responsible for bringing you a budget that protects the city, both near term and long term. And sometimes when we look at, as council, we look at things that are easy, they're low hanging fruit. Oh, that's, $5,000, just do it. Don't worry about it. Or that's just $800, or that's just this, or that's just that. Those little things add up to the big things, and that's why we didn't have replacement funds. That's why we were unable to pave streets. That's why we were unable to do things, is because we become mired in the small things. If you drink it, flush it, or drive on it, those are your main concerns right now for our city. Period. That's what brings people in. That's what gets them home. That's what lets us sleep at night in a comfortable, warm, clean house. The budget, looking at what I see, stability is key. And what I mean by that is steady. And I know, well, actually, Jeremy's probably it. Amanda's heard me say it before. Our old council have heard me say it for 3 years straight, and this is year 4. And I know I sound like a brokered record, but it works. It works. It absolutely works. And as evidenced by our reserve funds right now, it works, and it works well. No drastic moves one way or the other. We don't need to panic. We don't need to go up. We don't need to go down. We just need to be steady. We need to continue conservative spending policies. And what I mean by that is exactly that. The low-hanging fruit is what kills you. We all pick the fruit off the bottom of the tree, and then there's nothing left. Every dollar counts moving forward. Expect a decrease in purchasing power and higher costs for goods and services. Ultimately, we're going to pay the debt of the United States, and it's coming due. So I know it's frustrating to council when you see these increases year after year after year after year. Trust me, the council before us saw it, the council before them saw it, the council before them saw it. It's not going to change. The prices are going to increase. That's just life. That's what it is. Right now, it's important to limit debt during high interest rates. I don't know how many of y'all are old enough to remember, there was an awesome airline back in the day called Braniff International. They had really cool airplanes. They were, I know Mike remembers them, they were red and orange and green, and they had these beautiful planes, and they had leather seats. And I mean, they were the shizzle back in the day. Mike will tell you, they were it. They were hot. They were borrowing their money at 18, 20, 21, 25% interest, and they literally crashed their plane. They literally drove themselves out of business. Understanding what we have debt coming. We're going to have to pay for elevated storage. We're going to have to pay for all this isn't coming in the budget, but we've got some big ticket items coming. But be aware we need to limit our debt as best we can during high interest rates. It'll kill you. You're paying double payments for nothing to borrow the money. And lastly, keeping higher than normal reserve funds. I know that draws the ire of some people, but that's the way it is. When we have a force main go down, or we have a lift station go down, or like we have done several times over the past years, being able to pay for these $100,000 and $200,000 projects out of pocket with zero interest, we win. You're literally buying your freedom. But if you have to borrow money, you're buying your death. Trust me. Even at low interest loans, we're not doing good. So I just want to start off the budget meeting, and I don't want to be morbid or be Debbie Downer or whatever the case may be. We're presenting you a fantastic budget, and we'll talk about all the things you want to talk about during the budget. But if you look at what we've been able to do, we followed a blueprint for 4 years, and it has kept us in reserves building. We're buying equipment cash, and we've managed to restockpile our funds that we need to stockpile. And that comes from that footprint, or that blueprint we've been following. Yes, do we not have some of the nice things that some cities have? Yes, we don't. We're not ever going to, because we don't have that tax base. We don't have that population base. We don't have that sales tax base. We are who we are. And I said this during our last budget meeting, and I mean that sincerely. Be Richwood. Be proud of who we are. Be proud of how we got there. But don't compare yourself with City X or City Y. That's one of the most frustrating things that city staff hears from other people is, well, my God, they do this. Well, that's great. That's awesome. Their city also makes $10 more an hour per person. Their tax rate is also this. Their businesses are also this. Their sales tax is also this. We're not those people. You can only compare us to us. So keep that in mind during the budget process. Be proud to be Richwood. We are who we are. We've done a fantastic job. And we're doing a great job. But don't try to be what you're not. One of the things we talked about a couple of years ago was our identity. Who are we? Because you will hear when we talk about salaries, when we talk about tax rates, when we talk about city projects, one of the first things we do is go, well, what do they do? Or what do they do? Or what do they do? Well, does it matter? Does it really matter at the end of the day what they do? My neighbor drives a Mercedes 500 series. I don't. Should I drive a Mercedes 500 series? No. I don't make what they make. They live in a 3-story house. I live in a 1. You see how that doesn't always wash apples to apples? Our budget is our budget, and I would ask council going forward to look at that. It is Richwood's budget. Now, comparatively speaking, you heard Mike talk about it, you'll hear others talk about it when we talk about tax rates. Sure, compare our tax rates. But compare our tax rates with a jaded eye. This is our tax rate, and this is why we're in this position we're in. Good, bad, or indifferent, we're not that city. Any questions? Moving forward? Okay. Budget.
Okay. So,
I'm going to get the Coke out of here.
yeah, get on.
I get caffeine to stay awake.
That's your coffee thing, or something, whatever it
It's
is.
empty.
That's a second. So last year, it became obvious to me that I had not done a good job on kind of educating the council on how government accounting works. Now, I'm not going to teach you everything, but I wanted to give you an overview because it is different than private sector. Those that own businesses or have worked in a corporation or whatever and are familiar with accounting, the basics are the same, of course, debits and credits and all that kind of stuff that I get to do every day. But it's different. Our focus is different. So we use what is called fund accounting. So there's different funds which are kind of likened to different entities. And each of those funds has a purpose. And they're used to track the amount of the cash that's assigned for different purposes and the usage of that cash. And the motive behind government accounting is not profit. We're not here to run this city for a profit. We're here to be accountable and to make sure that we're good fiduciaries of the money that is entrusted with us. So the GFOA Blue Book is kind of the governmental accounting Bible. And they say businesses are operated with a profit motive, whereas governments exist primarily providing services. So we know what services we need to provide for our citizens, and we build a budget to provide those services. Then we find out how much money we're gonna get, or we calculate how much money we're gonna get. Those expenditures aren't to make that money grow. They're to use the money that we're entrusted with. We don't have a lot of control over that money. Okay, next slide. So, we have two main funds that we use. Our general fund, the goal of the general fund is to set a tax rate for property taxes that will cover our maintenance and operations of the city. It'll provide for the necessary services as well as reserve for future capital outlay and unexpected needs. The enterprise fund is more like your private sector business, although it's not for a profit. And we set the utility rates that will provide so that we can provide the services and the repair and maintenance, as well as the debt for debt that has been incurred on behalf of our utility fund, as well as build a reserve and have money for unexpected needs. So the next slide. So there's different levels of availability on the funds. Our government funds, you'll hear the term fund balance. They may have fund balance that's non-spendable. That could be assets. That could be money that is given to the city. We don't have any of this, but you know, this fund has to stay intact and you just get to use the interest or whatever. So unspendable. Restricted are like grants and things like that, that their use is restricted by an external source, like the government. Committed are resources that you as city council commit to a project or to a use. And we as staff can't just go use that money for something else because you guys have committed it. Then assigned is where we've set aside like these reserves, and staff, along with council, has said what it's going to be used for, but it's not as committed. And then we have unassigned, which is what we can spend. On the enterprise fund side, you have net investment and capital assets as part of your net position. It has net position rather than fund balance. That's all of our utility plant. Restricted, again, it's externally enforceable constraints like grants. And then unrestricted, which is what we can spend to operate the city or the utility plant. Okay, next slide. So these are our governmental funds. We have the general fund, which is the main operating fund of the city. It includes our administration, our permitting, our court, police, fire, city maintenance, code enforcement, parks. There's a portion of our property tax revenue or ad valorem tax revenue comes in there for the maintenance and operation of the city, as well as our sales tax revenue, franchise tax, which comes from like communication companies, court receipts, facility rentals, and some other miscellaneous. We have a replacement fund, which is money that we've been setting aside to replace equipment, vehicles, and the fire department needs. We have a general contingency fund, which by our charter, we can put up to 10% of expenditures into that fund every year. So we've been doing that since Eric and I came on board. We've been putting 10% of that year's expenditures we've been setting aside into the contingency fund. And that can be used at the discretion of the council for emergency use or whatever. We have a court security and court technology fund. Those are restricted by their source. When the court takes in fines or whatever, a portion of that comes to us for those two funds and can only be used for what they're designed for. We have a transportation fund, which was formed not too long before I came, and it covers the maintenance and repair and reconstruction for street, sidewalks, and drainage. And then we have a general obligation INS fund, which is where we pay our debt payments. And we have a grant fund where the monies for grants for general fund purposes go through. The next slide shows our enterprise or business type funds. That's the water and sewer fund. That contains all the revenue that comes in from our utility bills, and it's all the expense to run our utility department. We have an infiltration and inflow and infiltration reserve fund. This was started a few years back, and it is to accumulate money to maintain or repair to reduce our I&I into our sewer system, which don't ask me what that is, but Cliff knows. And then we have a utility capital improvement fund. This is where the impact fee money goes, and that is to build a reserve for future capital improvements. Then we also have two component unit funds, which we manage, we oversee, but we do not technically, it's not our money. One is for CCPD and one is for KRB, which is called Beautification Fund. Okay, any questions so far? You know everything there is to know now.
I do have one question. You're talking about these court funds and stuff. What are those? Can you give me any examples of those?
So,
I'll let her answer that.
court security, court technology are restricted funds that we can only use in the furtherance of the municipal court. So, I was able to use the technology fund to install new cameras.
Okay.
So while it does benefit the city as, like the building as a whole, it was able to be used because this is our courtroom also. Court security, I was able to, just example, purchase a shredder. It has to be used. There's a certain list of things that can be spent on.
Gotcha.
Similar to CCPD funds. It has to go in furtherance of technology. So I could use it. The court technology 4 years ago was a healthy amount, so we used it to migrate software. So I was able to use that new software, and then I paid the first year out of that. So it's just, it's like that. And it's 35% of court costs. So most of the court costs go to the state. We get to keep a certain percentage of that court cost for both, divided between both those funds.
Can any of that go back to the police department?
No,
None of it?
only for the court.
Only for municipal court.
I mean, you can pay a bailiff for my court. And I think at one point I talked about it, but it doesn't bring in that much. I mean, it's.
Yeah, and
It's hundreds
when
of
we talk
thousands,
about
it's
fund
gotta be.
balances, you'll see
No.
there's
All
not
the
a lot of
fees.
money in there.
Not
It kind of trickles in.
yeah.
Um,
It ebbs
in
and
the
flows
scheme of
with the
Yeah.
citations, but,
Okay.
yes, it could be used to pay for a bailiff to work court, not for like a salary for an officer, but while they're here.
And that's an example of a restricted fund where we are limited by an external force, not within the city, for what we can spend it.
I just have to be able to justify the spending.
Okay, next slide. So we talked a little bit about fund balance, and this is a list of our funds. And fund balance is accounted for at the end of a fiscal year. So when all the accounting is finalized for the year, basically when you net your inflows from your outflows, the difference is the change in your fund balance. So these are our funds, and I've listed the fund balance as of the beginning of each fiscal year. So the beginning of this current fiscal year, and these are, I've put under the description too if they're unassigned or restricted. So in our general fund right now, we have $1.897 million of unrestricted, or unassigned, sorry. Jumping down to our general fund contingency, that's the one I said we've been putting 10% of expenditures in there. This shows the balance at the beginning of this year was $843,870. I did put another transfer in there at the beginning of this fiscal year that's not reflected on 10-1 yet. So that sits at about $1 million right now. You can see the court security, court technology, beautification, again, that's not our money, that's KRB's money. The transportation fund is really kind of a restricted or assigned, however you want to word it, portion of our general fund, because that money is only used for street sidewalks and drainage. It receives income from our transportation fee that's on our utility bills, and it also gets, just for streets, it gets a portion of our sales tax revenue. So those monies go right in there, and they're restricted by their source. Our water and sewer fund, that's our utility fund. As you can see in 10-120 and 10-121, the balances were higher. That's because we had bond money in there. But they've dropped down, but we built them back up. As a side note, before Eric and I came, it was a negative on that line, so we're doing well. The grant fund money is, it's kind of a flow-through or pass-through fund because we get the grant funds in, but then we spend them on their designated costs. So, GFOA, which is Government Finance Officers Association, they're kind of our overseeing guidance organization. They recommend that we have a minimum of 60 days of either general fund revenue or general fund expenditures maintained as a cushion or as a reserve. But per our auditors, because we live in a high-risk area, in case you didn't know, we're better prepared with a minimum of 120 to 180-day reserve. So if you take the budgeted expenditures and figure out how much of that would be for a half a year, that's really the minimum that we should have in reserve for general fund. Any questions on any of that?
High-risk area pertaining to what, like natural disasters, things of
Yeah.
that nature?
We
Okay.
could have,
And we don't front the money for
you know, we could have a
Yeah.
hurricane hit, and maybe 6 months to 5 years down the road, we could get recovery from FEMA or something.
Right.
But in the meantime, we have to fund the recovery.
Sure.
So we need to have a healthy reserve so that we can do that.
They're still closing out Harvey stuff now.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was gonna say,
I know.
we were broke during Harvey, so we couldn't do a lot of things that we needed to do.
They're still
Yeah.
actually closing out Ike, I found out. I went to a TDM meeting, and that's 17 years, I think. Any other questions on any of that? So, you know, the main gist on this is that we have come a long way, because these fund balances were minuscule 4 to 5 years ago, if not negative. So we're doing really well. The next slide is our replacement fund. And we have one fund for all replacement purposes for equipment, but then I manually keep track of it because it's allocated 3 ways. The first 2 are equipment and vehicles for the city. And so we have transfers go in each year that are budgeted to fund that. The fire department also gets transfer each year. Theirs is at their discretion to use for equipment, whether it be vehicles or equipment, but on the general fund side, we have equipment and vehicles. And then any interest that we get on it, as you can see, that's grown over the years. In 21, we got $9. And this year so far, we have $6,700. So I've moved more money into our investments from this. So, but that money is unallocated. So whatever was used, whatever replacement was used for, we could use some of that interest income as well. Earlier in fiscal year 22, we sold a vehicle. And so what we got from the auction went back into replacement. And earlier in this fiscal year, this current one, we sold some surplus equipment, and all that money, the $43,000, went in here so that it can be used later. Any questions on our replacement fund?
The negatives are where you bought equipment, right?
What's this?
That's, the negative is where we bought.
Yeah, that's where we bought. You can see in 22, we bought a public works truck and a code enforcement vehicle. So that's at negative $59,000. The year before, the fire department bought some things, so.
Vehicles, is all vehicles including police vehicles?
No.
Okay, so that's
I
separate.
mean, it could be technically, but
CCPD usually takes care
so far, traditionally or historically, CCPD has covered the police vehicles.
So like, I
So-
think we recently sold some at auction.
So then that goes back to CCPD.
Okay.
This doesn't have the equipment we bought.
It didn't come out of replacement, it came out of balance.
Oh,
Now, this coming budget year, a little teaser for coming up, we are proposing to buy a new public works truck, and we're planning to take it out of.
Absolutely not. Struck down. Don't even think about it.
I am just the mouthpiece.
Smart car.
Don't get in the way of his bullets.
Okay.
Pogo stick.
So a lot of what I'm trying to do is give you a snapshot of where we are financially. In the next slide shows our debt. And so I just want to quickly go through these. We have a debt that our last payment will be in this budget that we are working on now. It was a $500,000 loan to replace sewer lines in Glenwood Bayou. So our final payment will be August of '25. So this budget we're working on now will be the final payment. We had $1,035,000 loan for the new water tower back in 2011. It'll be paid off in '31. The $740,000 loan for construction of 2 water wells. It's an enterprise fund debt, and it was paid off this current fiscal year. It will be paid off this August. So that is one expense going away.
I'm sorry, the loan for $1 million, it says water tower and park expansion. We got a loan for a park expansion?
It was in 2011. I wasn't here.
Water tower would be the 250,000 gallon elevated. As far as
Yeah, I'm not questioning that at all.
None of us
People
were
gotta
here.
drink water
None
and
of us
flush the
were here,
toilet,
so.
but, okay.
oh, that's when they,
Which
isn't
part?
that when they covered the pool up and all that? Because that's where the tower was built, wasn't it?
No.
Gardens at the pool.
No.
Maybe
So-
2009 was when they redid the pool area, where the pool used to be and all that. Maybe.
So as you see,
Trying to think.
but, you know, none
Been
of
a
us
while.
were here at that time. There was a debt for the construction of this building we're in, and it'll be paid off in '32. There was in 2019, there were 2 bond issues approved, and one was for street sidewalks and drainage. A good portion of that went to Oakwood Shores. That will be on the books until '39, and then the North Water Plant will be on the books till '49. When they expanded this building, they took out a bank loan for $300,000, and that will be paid off in '32. And then in 2019, the bond issue, they didn't issue all of the bonds originally. So in '21, they issued the final amount, to complete the streets, sidewalks, and drainage, and those will be on the books till '41. So this chart down below is our obligation for fiscal year '25. The bluish purple ones are general fund, I think.
Enterprise fund.
Let me look here. No, those are the enterprise funds. The peachy colored ones are the general fund, not general fund, the INS debt fund, the governmental fund. So the INS debt fund requirement is $453,438.64. So as the tax rate is developed, we have to get that amount of revenue to pay that debt. So a portion of our tax rate is fixed based on what the county calculates per $100 of assessed value based on our assessed values to get that money. And then the remainder of the tax rate is for our general fund M&O. The enterprise fund debt of $363,205 is paid by the enterprise fund, and that goes into the calculation along with our operating expenses for our utility rates. So, any questions on any of that? Clear as mud, right? Okay, the next slide.
Real quick, on all those, like, on those debts, it's like, does it fluctuate from year to year, or is it pretty much like a fixed
It's
interest?
it's
or less?
fixed. Yeah, I pay based on the amortization schedules that were given when the debt was taken out. So this next slide, and I bolded and underlined, and I probably should have capitalized the word early. I went to a meeting in April to the county, and they gave us our preliminary assessed values. We won't get our certified final carved in stone values until the end of July, first part of August.
That's when all the hearings and everything for the protests are
And
concluded,
sometimes
right?
even 2 years ago, and I think maybe even last year, there were still some protested.
Yeah.
So what they certify is the lowest value it can be. And if it goes higher, we get a bonus. But so, as we sit now, the county is assuming or estimating that our appraised values within the city of Richwood is $631,327,864. Then there's a homestead cap. And
I'm sorry, Trish, is this 631 commercial and residential?
yes, it's
Okay,
appraised values.
everything.
For homesteads, which are residences, there's an exempt or a cap, so that takes off 37+ million. Then there is a 3.231 cap. It's called the circuit breaker, and it's a law that assessed values go up no more than 20% each year, and so it caps some. And I'm not in the assessor's office to know how that's calculated, but that takes another 6 million off of our assessed values. So that brings our assessed value down to 587+ million. Then there's state exemptions that we have no control over that take off 22 million. And then we have local exemptions. And these you guys do have control over, not for this year, but for future. There's an exemption called a Freeport exemption, which, and Eric, you might have to help me on this. If a business has inventory less than 175 days,
It's pass-through inventory that comes into our city as warehoused, manufactured, altered, whatever the case may be, and then shipped back out within that amount of time, then it's not assessed value. We have one business in the city of Richwood who is eligible for this and claims the exemption. We did the research on it and looked at many cities have done away with the Freeport exemption. It's a catch-22. You know, if you want to keep it, you can keep it. We're missing out on that $2 million worth of value.
which is about 11,000.
About 11,000 is what we get on that. Many cities in Texas, including Freeport, oddly enough, do not allow the Freeport exemption. Go figure. But you know, ultimately, you will present this to council, and you will say, "Hey, look, we want to do away with the Freeport exemption," and then that business will say, "Well, fine, I'm moving to another city that allows the exemption," and that's great. So they move, and then people will say, "Look, you drove business out, yes, but we're not making any money on that business." So it's a catch-22. Right now, we've always allowed the exemption. It's one business.
Yeah.
It's 11 grand.
Theoretically, couldn't you do away with it, but grandfather in the old business?
Well, I think once you either have it or you don't.
We have to pass it by ordinance to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Then we offer a homestead exemption, and that takes 5 million, roughly, off of our assessed value. 2 years ago, I think it was, we started offering an over 65 exemption and a disabled person exemption. Council voted to include those 2 years ago during the budget process. So you can see the amounts those take off, 7.6 million for the over 65 and almost $500,000 for the disabled. So that brings our net taxable value down to $549,500,541. Now, this is 11.68% above what was certified for last fiscal year. And of that amount that is new, 10 million, or of the increase, 10,342,000 represent either new additions or improvements, like new homes, or 1.9% of the total increase. Now, if we took this net taxable value times our existing tax rate, as we see right now, our total levy would be 2.9 million. We'd have 453,000 of that would be debt, and the rest would be for general fund M&O. So about 350,000 more than what we had this year. This is a very just rough calculation based on the existing tax rate. Most definitely our tax rate is going to change and most likely will go down. We can only take in up to 8% above what we took in last year on existing parcels. So we're limited. So this is a pie in the sky kind of estimate.
The county appraised value, is that the number as of the May 15th deadline for protest? That's as they sent it out for all the initial assessments? Okay. Did they give you guys any kind of gauge on a percentage of how much that is adjusted down after all the protests are complete?
They did say last year was an all-time record, and you know, when we met.
Because they lost their mind last
Yeah.
year and this year again?
Well, last year, the reason they went up, the state came in and audited the county,
They were doing it
Yeah.
wrong.
and they were calculating the assessments wrong.
Yes.
We're limited, we can only go up 10% a year, so they went up that 10%. But the state made them readjust. It wasn't a county decision. And of course, Richwood itself has no say in it.
Right. I'm
This
just trying to
year-
get a gauge on about how
Yeah.
much that number will reduce. If they gave you any kind
You
of
know, they didn't have, it wasn't up to
idea.
the protest date yet. When we had our meeting, the notices had just gone out. All they
Okay.
could say was that last year it was a record, but they didn't give us any.
Okay.
And they have, like I said, till the end of July
Yeah.
to get us the
I know someone just bought a house that was listed at 310, been selling at 310, it sold for 268.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's about 15% off.
Yeah. So this is just to give you guys an idea, but this is a very preliminary, very early, not anywhere close to final numbers. I just wanted to give you, this information exactly came off a form the county gave me, the calculation and everything, so. Okay,
So really, we only go 8% above.
yes, and what we found last year was that,
Can I ask a
This-
question before you move on? I got lost here. So the net you said in here that this new construction accounted for 10,342,000, which is only 1.9%. So that,
of the increase.
right. So the additional 9.78% was property value increases?
So last year, when we were calculating what we needed to do for tax rate, we found that even though the state limits taxing districts to go up only 3.5% on their revenue on previous held properties, that if you're under, I think it's 20,000 people, you can go up 8%. So that is what we did last year. We still dropped the tax rate. So even if we do that again this year, we are still going to end up dropping the tax rate because of the higher assessed values. The one reason to keep it as high as we legally can is that if we lower it this year, we've effectively lowered it every year going forward because
It's a
it's
compound
always
deduction.
built on the year before.
Yep.
So, okay. Any other questions on that? Now we'll actually get into some budget numbers. So, I gave you all a packet that looks like this. And the first page is our budget calendar. And much of this also is set by state law. So I've highlighted where you guys are kind of involved. Tonight, of course, is the first highlighted one. Or no, not yet, that's tonight. Next month, we'll have another workshop. And at that one, we'll deal more with the revenue side. It's just too early to deal with the revenue right now. But technically, you should build your budget before you look at your revenue, because you're building your budget on what you need. In August, we will bring the budget back to you, hopefully with some final numbers. And then in September, we have to vote on it. We vote on the tax rate and the budget, and it has to be to the county by the 3rd of September, or we are in trouble with the county. So those dates are all pretty much carved in stone. But this, the following pages after that is our general fund and our enterprise fund budget line by line. I don't want to get into the weeds. You guys really don't need to get in the weeds, but for transparency, we want to show you where our money's going. As our governing body, you guys are our oversight and you approve it. But as your staff, you know, we give you what we feel we need. And as Eric said, we're very conservative on this budget. We don't have fluff built in. This year, we were more strict than ever on, okay, you want this number on this line, why? And they had to tell us. The fire department came to us with some requests, and we didn't give them the full amount because they couldn't document why. We just really, we want our budget to be what we need, not what we want. So I'm not going to go through this whole document, but it's here for your information. So back to the slide. Our total expenditures in '23, we spent $2.9 million. For this current year that we're sitting in right now, we budgeted just over that of $2.939 million. This year, we are budgeting $3.198. So it's an increase of $258,000, and we'll go over why in a bit. Then I have the sources and the uses. These aren't operating expenses, but they're where the fund balance gets moved between funds. So CCPD, for the last couple of years, has transferred some money to us to help cover overtime for the police department. Last year they transferred 25, this year they're transferring 15. And then that 65,000 transfer from replacement fund I mentioned earlier, Cliff wants a new truck, or needs a new truck. Needs a new truck. And that's a budgeted amount, but when he buys that truck, if it comes in at $58,752.38, that's what'll be transferred. Okay. Then on the uses, the contingency fund I mentioned before. As you can see up above, the expenditures budgeted are $3.197 million, and it's just 10% of that goes into our contingency fund. We have increased our transfer to our replacement reserves. We went from 20 to 30,000 for vehicles, 4 to 5,000 for equipment, and 15 to 30,000 for the fire department. The main thing the fire department is trying to accumulate replacement fund for is that when the fire engine that we're currently paying on is past its prime, they'll have the money to buy a new one. Right now they're paying it, or we're paying a debt payment on it. So, well, it's a lease. It's not a debt payment, it's a lease. And then we always transfer some money to the KRB fund for their use.
One second. So, Mayor and Council, I think because so many of you are new with this, so these replacement funds were designated years and years ago. And when we got here, there was a huge discrepancy over what was transferred, wasn't transferred. These balances should have been much higher. So we have brought those back, and the funds are actually moving in there now. So the increase this year from 20 to 30 and from 15 to 30 for the fire department is basically making up for lost time.
Mm-hmm.
So
If
this
you
is
could-
money that should have been put in there that wasn't put in there.
Can you go back 3 slides to the replacement fund?
While you're on that
Maybe.
replacement fund, what determines, for example, on a fire truck that it needs to be replaced? Is it just sheer
They have
age? Or
They have a life average of 20 years.
Mhm.
We have a 10-year lease on the one we're paying on now, and it started in 18, I think. So they figured out how much, you know,
When you say a lease, is it an equipment lease? Because typically an equipment lease, you lease it and then you buy it for $1 at the end of the lease. Is that
yeah,
how it's set up?
I don't know.
I would like to reiterate that at this time last year, we requested a presentation from the fire department and financials to help us understand and to make better decisions about these line items for money coming in and money going out. We've seen one presentation with no financials.
Yeah.
And so I take issue with that, again, because it's very difficult to make good decisions when you have no data to base those decisions on.
Right.
And I want to be clear on this. This is my decision to put this money back. This wasn't a request from the fire department. This is looking in arrears that we should have been putting this money. This is not a request from the fire department. This is me looking back when
Understood.
we robbed Peter to pay Paul and never paid him back. So we're in a financial situation where we should put it back.
So if you look at this replacement
But
fund.
all the rest we will,
Yeah.
yes.
If you look at this slide on the replacement fund, up at fiscal year 19, it says unknown allocation, $7,770. When I came, you know, everybody was saying we had money in replacement. So as I untangled everything, that's what we have. And now we're sitting at 233,000. So we have a ways to go, but we are better, in better shape.
You don't, I don't know, I'm not trying to get too detail oriented, but I understand what you're saying. We have the money, we can put it back, we need to put it back. And I don't disagree with the replacement funds, I just want to make sure that, I don't know how to say this, that just because it gets to a certain point in timeline, do you have to replace it, or if
Yes.
it's still in good working
If you want a fire department to show up at your house,
I think part of our problem is we wait until it's not worth anything to sell.
Yeah.
Also.
A lot of times, we're trying to model replacement so we don't have to drive stuff to failure. Because you ultimately pay 2 or 3 times what the equipment's worth, trying to hang on to it for elongated periods of time. So we try to stick within depreciation schedules, for 5 years for vehicles, 10 years for some equipment. It does not necessarily always have to fall there, but it's a good model
Correct.
to follow.
And again, don't disagree with that, but if it depreciates or you get to that point, but does it go by usage or?
So with the
miles
fire
or
department-
something, you know what I mean? Is that kind
I
of
would
makes sense?
say the answer is yes to all of that. There's discretion.
Ballpark then.
And we don't have anything carved in stone that when this
This
vehicle
is
is
what
5
I was
years old.
getting at earlier, though.
Right,
And we
okay.
have
We
no
have
data.
vehicles that are 10 years old.
And-
This is
that
what
we still
happens.
think confidently
Because there's
have 10
nothing
years
to-
left.
Okay, well,
And-
So
that makes
we,
sense.
you know, we do and if we end up with a surplus, sometimes that really turns out when there's something that we might have missed or went to the wayside.
Right.
We did drive to failure,
Okay,
whether
right, right.
intentionally or unintentionally.
And one thing I want to comment on this reserve fund is as I talked about the different designations of fund balance, this is an assigned fund. So this is assigned to these uses. Doesn't mean 10 years
It's
from now,
restricted.
council couldn't come in and say, we need to use this money for this instead. Okay?
Gotcha.
which
And-
is what happened.
And the allocation here is of our own doing. This is, this is in one fund, but I keep track, since, once I unsnarled it, I keep track of what we put in for each thing.
This is kind of to prevent like the Ford Explorer situations, right?
Yeah.
You want
I
those
was there
again?
when we did it, and I was one of the people who pushed hard for that, because we had just come off a Harvey possibly. We had $0. We couldn't even afford to buy generators to run pumps or rent pumps. After Harvey, we were catastrophic financially, and we had critical failures in equipment with Public Works. I think we had some pump problems where we got in a situation having to replace stuff, and we had no money to do so. And so it was the same thing. I'm on CCPD, equipment replacement, those vehicles. There's a reason that on CCPD I always push for us to be the ones who are responsible for making sure our officers aren't riding around in a car with no air conditioning for a year at a time because no one had the forethought to plan ahead. And that's why we take the money back when we sell the vehicles, so that we can make sure we ensure that our officers have those cars in the future. And that's something that we do, I wouldn't say it's a courtesy, but because we can. Same thing, I pushed really hard for this because of the amount of problems that we had after Harvey when we were in such a financial pickle before FEMA repaid what we spent. It was important because sometime while I was on council, they were also asking for a fire truck. We'd saved nothing to pay for $1 million plus piece of machinery, and it cost more to recertify it and get the old one up to snuff than it would have cost, like it was to get it to go for 2 or 3 more years, then we could just get a brand new one that would last 10 to 20. It's
And when you talk about the fire engine they bought in 18, Clint came and brought me after the fact, because I wasn't here in 18. You know, that they'd had discussed and had a plan where so much would go into replacement, so that when it came time to buy a new one, which he said, you know, we have a 10-year lease, but it's only going to last for 20. And I believe you're right, you know, at the end of the 10-year lease, we own it, but it could last another 10 years. But then we don't want to have we don't have to go into debt to get a new one.
I 100% agree with you. I just have nothing to look at.
Right.
As requested.
Yeah.
To base those decisions on.
Yeah. So anyway, and we do want to remember that this is just a sign. This is not restricted by an outside thing. It's, council can change where these monies are used at any time council deems fit. But it's a way to save and avoid debt. If you remember when I was showing you the debt in 2011, I think it was, they took out a $300,000 debt to redo this building.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have to do that today.
Right.
You know, so we've been paying interest on it ever since. So anyway, and we will go into more detail about this, you know, in later budget meetings, but this is just what's going to come out of the fund as we propose it right now. Now, there's some items to note at the bottom. One of them is we do a COLA increase every year based on the Social Security's COLA. And then every other year, we do a merit increase. That's just historically what we've done for our staff. This year is a COLA-only increase, and Social Security sets their COLA the October, so they set theirs last October to take effect December 1st. We're basing ours on that, and it's taking effect a year later. So we're recommending a 4%.
So just for clarity, this is not performance-based, it's a flat 4% across the board COLA?
Yes.
Okay.
Social Security's was 3.2. We all know it's probably, inflation hasn't slowed down, so we're proposing a 4%. Attorney's fees have increased, so there is that for the addition. Our probably biggest increase in general fund expenditures is our insurance cost, and we don't know what that is yet. I've put in a 25% increase. Last year when I did that, I undershot it. This year, we hope it will. We'll take care of it. But
Do you have an idea of a percentage on the attorney fees, Trish?
right now,
It was up front on this. I saw it earlier.
it would be in the line by
Must
line.
have missed it. Sorry.
And they're divided over different departments. But under admin,
$15,000.
Actually decreased, but each department will have a different amount.
so under admin, this year we budgeted $25,000 for legal fees. And By
Gonna
the end
blow
of May,
through
we're
that.
already at 90, almost 19,000. So, we have 40,000 budgeted. Again, legal is a few departments, but it is in that line item.
Is insurance cost health insurance or the other?
So we have not got our health insurance quote yet, so what's budgeted right now is what we currently have.
This,
The insurance, the liability, windstorm, we just got the bill, and it went up 20,000, I think, this year, which is this fiscal year.
Which includes,
It's due June 1st.
includes our new properties. So that's a main raise of that. So what drives that is the insurance values is replacement value, construction value, and then we added
The water
the
tower.
North Water Plant. So that's a $4 million property.
Last year, our windstorm went up 40%, just raised.
Yeah.
This year, it went up about 20,000 with the new property. But what we pay next June will be what's comes out of this budget we're working on now. So kind of a year behind, but that's what I've projected on. But our liability, they're working on it now. We'll get it, when did he say? Mid-July? So we'll get that and we'll know more by our next budget meeting. But right now, I just have a buffer in there of, I think, 20 or 25%.
Eric, I mean, I've probably asked this before, but on the windstorm, is it, like some of the older buildings are smaller, is it better to, in a sense, self-insure them instead of pay more? I mean, for like the community center, I mean, how much are we paying in insurance on that versus what it would cost to,
We can,
even if we did rebuild it, you know, I don't know.
It's a nominal expense for that building. We looked at that. It's nominal expense. The problem, I think we've discussed this with councils prior, is normally when you have an event where a building is lost, that's not your only loss.
Right, there's gonna be other.
There's going to be other losses. Then we have our deductibles, we've got our buy downs, we've got debris cleanup, we've got all of the other associated costs. So right now, you know, hypothetically, if we lost the PK4's building, you know, we could rebuild it for 60 grand, you know, hypothetically, numbers.
Right.
And that's great. We've got the 60 grand, we could do it. The problem is those initial outlays of hundreds of thousands of dollars that are associated with that event. We end up in a Harvey situation where,
When you recoup that from the insurance, you can help.
yes,
Okay.
yes. So, but that initial outlay for that first year and a half, you almost deplete your ready cash. And then you come into, okay, we're starting to get, you know, repayment for some of these issues or whatever the case may be. You're already so far behind that 60,000 is never realized and you never build the building back.
Right. Okay.
So the nominal expense to insure that little building, what they redo every year is they go back and they look at your building costs. And it has gone up substantially because of materials and so on, labor. So that was a big hit. But the biggest single increase is the new building, new equipment.
Okay, any other questions?
Long story, but.
So are there any other questions?
How much of a, how much with that Clute transmission line? I think it was pretty expensive. I remember asking about that last year. I was like,
That's
what
on the
happened?
enterprise fund, which is the next one.
What? Oh, okay.
We had budgeted
Yeah.
this current year 300,000, which was an oversight. It's 150,000. So, any other questions on the general fund? Okay. So then the next page is the enterprise fund. And we have operating expense there that has dropped about 200,000. And some of that is, we over budgeted the wastewater treatment plant transmission line. That was an error on my part, or it's probably Cliff's fault. Yeah, it was Cliff's fault. But we budgeted 300,000, it's really 150. Cliff always messes me up, yeah.
Better that way than the other way.
Yeah. But so we are seeing a drop in expense there of just about 200,000. Again, we have the increases in insurance and things and the COLA, but Cliff's mess up is saving us $150,000 this year. And then this current year, we budgeted $80,000 to Strand for this impact fee study they're doing right now that we won't have next year. So that is the savings there. And then as far as non-operating expenses, as I mentioned earlier, the enterprise fund pays their own debt. So those are here, and if you'll see, we also have a long-term lease on the meters. And again, this was before I came, but we've been paying roughly $74,000 a year on these meters. This is done now. It's the lease is done. We probably have another 10 years, 5 to 10 years of use on the meters. 9.
When you say the lease, the payment for the lease is
Yes,
done? Okay,
yes.
it's fully matured?
Yes.
But you're
But-
speaking of lifespan,
Yeah,
particularly with the, yes.
yeah, but
The
in
warranty is in 9
In
years.
8 to 9 years, we're gonna need to be looking at
Okay.
getting new meters. So that's another reason to set aside money, but we can save it now. So what I'm proposing to, and this would be up to council, but take that 74,000 or around it to 75 and move that every year going forward now to the capital improvement fund so that we would have that reserve build for when we can go get the meters and maybe not have to have a lease.
That's like each house individual water meter, right?
Yeah, if we fund it now with this money, where the assumption, first round costs about 600 grand, and we're thinking that 700, 750 is very conservative, and don't know if we're gonna get it that cheap, but that'll give us about that revenue within about 9 to 10 years.
So about the time we would need new ones, we would
Yeah.
have that reserve set
Once
aside?
your warranty goes out, you're at $180 to $210 a meter
Yeah,
with no.
So we wanted to get your feeling on that because I don't have that budgeted in here right now. But taking that 74,000 and putting that into reserve,
That's assuming all of them are gonna go out at the same time. Are you gonna just replace all of them at the same time?
it's a
It
whole
would probably be
system.
best to do so
Just-
because they're all on the same communication system.
It's a whole
fixed base.
system.
yeah, they're smart meters. Smart.
Do y'all live here?
And
How smart
then
are they?
going on down,
$200
You know when my
smart.
toilet's leaking?
Mike, on any given day, not so smart.
so then going on down is our debt payments on our 2011. This, as I said, will be the last year for, was it the 2011 I said we're paying off this year? Or no, the 2004 is being paid off this year, so that'll be the last payment for that. And then we're paying on the 2019 B bonds, which was for the North Water Plant. And then right before I came, part of a utility rate increase for sewer was supposed to be dedicated or committed to the I&I fund, and it was calculated to be about 75 to 80,000 a year that would go. So when I came, I redid the calculation, and it was only 34,000 that was coming in as revenue for the year from that rate increase. So that 34,000 every year goes into the I&I fund, which up until I came, it hadn't been transferred at all. And then when I first came, I keep going back to that year, but we paid off a note at the bank for the enterprise fund that was 22,000 a year. So we just started putting that 22,000, similar to what I'm proposing for the meter payment. It just started going into capital improvement fund to start building.
Okay,
So the items of note here, the COLA is in there again, the decrease in the transit line from Cliff's mistake. Insurance costs are, I estimated them higher, but it could even be higher, we don't know. We don't have the budgeted engineering costs for the study like we did this time. The meter capital lease was finalized this current fiscal year, so it's not on the 25. And then the Series 2004 final payment will be in 25, so then that payment will go away. The 40,000 principal and the 1140 interest.
Should we maybe put some engineering, don't we always probably, I mean,
We always have some
Something.
engineering, but this was a
A specific.
one-time specific
Yeah,
that's not in there.
generally, we can foresee that coming. I don't think there's any need for any large amounts unless we have something identified that will open it.
So this shipping containers, are we there yet? Or are we?
We're not there
sorry,
right
No,
now.
we're still on
He is just
enterprise
always a
fund.
page ahead of me.
No, I just got bored with that page.
So anyway, any other questions on the enterprise fund? And again, this is a preliminary look at the numbers. Right now, both general fund and enterprise fund are in the black. They have a good cushion right now, but that cushion will, it always changes. So, but we just wanted to give you guys a look.
Okay,
I
take
think
the
that's a great look.
Supplemental.
Yeah, I'm going next.
No, you want me to take it?
Yeah.
On the supplementals, so what we had talked about, and I'm going to step back to the last budget meeting last year, was our fund balance is increasing. Well, why don't we use that and lower this and lower the taxes and do what we already met, lower taxes. We already did the best we can do on that. And we had talked about using some of that replacement fund for Cliff's equipment, which is what we did. And we said this year we will go back and redo Misty Court. We said we've had it on the books for 2 years now.
Yes.
This would be the second year, so now is the year. So we ranked these in order of our request to council. So this is a general fund balance. This isn't a general fund item, this is a general fund balance. $700,000 to redo Misty Court and Cypress,
What on those streets?
redo them,
The entire street?
the entire
Okay.
street. Yeah.
is that?
I didn't know if we were talking
Yeah, I
about
was gonna
ditch,
say that
drainage,
drainage.
whatever,
The street,
sidewalk. Okay,
Reconstructed.
gotcha.
Yeah, to county standard, just like we did at Oakwood Shores. So number 2 is the additional public works position, which we hinted about the other day. We let the cat out of the bag on that one. As y'all are all aware, we did away with one court position, and we took that money and hired Cliff another person. This is an additional person on top of that, so we're net gain 0 on the other position. That was already budgeted. This position is another position which we need dearly. And that's enterprise fund, 44,025. Is that in the budget? No, we didn't include that.
Is this to help alleviate overtime?
Well, to alleviate
No?
people, yeah.
That's just to meet a bare basic need. City of Richwood Public Works is not staffed well enough to handle any kind of preventative maintenance for your lift stations, valves, fire hydrants. So what we're trying to do is at least cover the water distribution side of that need
Okay,
and establish an exercising program because the TCEQ says I have to, and that you guys have to have operational valves within your water system.
correct.
So we need to be able to have staff enough to determine that. The service, maintenance, functionality, and be able to report back to y'all what works and what does not work.
Just like hydrants have to be flushed on a routine schedule and et cetera,
Yeah,
right?
TCEQ has the gall to tell you if you have a distribution system, parts have to work too.
Yeah,
And we've been trying to string this along, and we've gotten roughly 85 hydrants serviced and about 100 valves turned in about 5 years. So we can't consistently stay on it. I need
Yeah.
a new person.
How many employees does Public Works have?
In the field, I have 7.
And what is their labor efficiency?
Well, we're trying to determine that with software that we mentioned in the previous budget to show council where we sit on that. I don't have that software. I cannot show you.
Yeah, I would never hire anyone at my company without knowing the labor efficiency of what we currently have. Just kind of an example, if you have, 5 people that are at 80% efficiency, and you add another person, you have 6 people, now you all of a sudden went down to 60% efficiency. So it's a delicate balance there of making sure that you're you're operating.
Utilizing your labor in the best possible way.
Yeah, and it's good for morale to be busy and, and have good streamlined days that they do things. And I think that's an important aspect of it.
So when Cliff first got here, we had 11 people.
No,
No.
we had 11 positions budgeted, a couple of years before I got here.
So we've gone from 11 to 6, now 7, and yet our unfunded mandate testing requirements and has gone through the roof. So we're
32% population increase since 2018.
we're
Reconstruction on your stations.
we're in a bad way.
Can-
We're not keeping up. Go ahead.
I was gonna say this at the end anyway, but, I always, at every budget meeting, try to impart how important it is to have enough staff on our public works crew. Historically, underfunded, understaffed, overexpected. The reason that we had so much infrastructure problems with I&I, half the categories on here in our enterprise fund that we have was because we didn't maintain our pipes and stuff. So infiltration and inflow that costs us money every single year is caused by us not staffing and funding our public works department adequately. Not only that, but we asked them historically to pull double duty. The same guy who is responsible for working on maintenance is also responsible for mowing the yards. And people are wanting everything done at the same time. So historically, I have found, first we underfunded it and understaffed it. Then we asked more of them. Then we added all these projects. Then we got all this money and we decreased the amount of staff to do the work that we had all this extra money to do. And then a lot of the problems that we've had, like well failures, was from screens not being cleaned. Debris and dirt in our lines and things like that because preventative maintenance wasn't done because there was no time and no staff to do it. So I've seen these guys at every hour of the night working. The reason there's so much overtime is because there's more work to be done than people to do it. The reason there's so much overtime in that department is also because we're paying a guy $45 an hour regularly, and then we have to pay him double time and a half to do the same job that he would have been doing. Well, that cuts into their budget every year, and they're robbing that money to staff the public works, paying time and a half for the same job that's mowing yards, because the guys don't have enough time to do all the things they're being asked to do. And over the years, I've seen every year, it seems like cuts do get made to that department, but more is asked of them. And so I say that every year, I look at it, every year, seems like they cut public works a lot to meet needs. They make a lot of sacrifices over the course of the budget year. So it's really just something that I thought I would impart, that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and I would rather pay more guys to do the job than pay the debt that it costs us when our water system doesn't meet TECQ compliance. Thank you.
So essentially that's what we're asking on the additional public works. Number 3 was the streets and parks master plan, $200,000. Again, the supplemental general fund balance. This is money we have that we told council we can spend. What's important, one of the things that we always get asked are, what streets are next in line? How do you determine those streets? How do you determine this? How do you determine what goes on? Mike has mentioned in the past, parks, how are we going to do these improvements? It's not like the money hits, then you figure out what to do with it. You really need a plan to move forward so we can budget with that next year. So we can use the streets and parks master plan going forward. Just because a road looks bumpy, and Oakwood Shores is a great example. There were sections of Oakwood Shores that were bumpy, but they weren't completely failed. We had other sections that were completely failed, but yet we did some of the streets that were just bumpy first when the complete failures got passed over year after year. So if you have a Parks and Engineering master plan or streets master plan, it spells it out for you. Look, this is what you can expect to spend in 5 years, in 6 years, 8 years, whatever the case may be. And we don't have to go around and,
prioritized for you.
yes,
Yep.
and we don't have to go around and do the eye test of, yeah, that one looks really bad, but you didn't do the geo on it, or you didn't, it's subjective at best. So that's what helps with that.
I think my biggest concern on the streets is it from an emergency standpoint, you know, can an emergency vehicle get down it, for sure? I mean, if we're there, it obviously needs to be fixed.
Well,
We don't
and
wanna do it, we wanna do it before it gets to that point.
Yeah.
And that's what this plan helps.
Well,
Yeah.
and this plan also, Mr. Challenger, they also grade stuff like that on several different levels, which in situations like you're talking about, absolutely, we want to replace, but there's other signs within streets and failure of those streets that could tell you that within 5 years, you probably need to expect that this is totally gone. And that kind of foresight planning at least gives council the opportunity to see somewhat in the future with sound data and science, besides me just standing here telling you it needs to be done.
it looks bad.
Yeah, so it's, absolutely, I agree, but the planning serves so much more on so many more levels.
Number 4 is the contract labor, Tradesman International. So the $65,000 request here comes out of the transportation fund. We do, you know, you hear a lot of time we spent a lot of money on roads in the last few years. And in perfect timing, we had a drought and cracked the roads immediately. And we have to fill those gaps, we have to crack seal that. And, you know, we're spending in excess of $100,000 to not even cover all of the streets that we need to. So last year, Cliff rented the machine, and we did a lot of it ourselves. But then we realized quickly we can't keep up. And the request for that is contract labor instead of using a contractor, which would have been well in north of what?
Well over 100.
Yeah, 140, 150,000. We can still use the contract labor, but do it ourselves. So that's the request for that, just for crack sealing. And what else?
So
That's the machine rental and the material as well for that.
oh, that was my question.
Yeah.
That's for the material, the machine, and the labor?
Yes.
Okay,
And Tradesman International is just a service that provides you contract labor, anything from pipe fitting to
Yeah.
HVAC to, you know.
I guess my question about how much of the 65 is equipment and material?
15.
Would it not be maybe a smart idea to add a second public works instead of a contract labor?
Okay, so, no.
No.
This is a one-off maintenance event, and the request is centered around that one event, which is asphalt crack sealing.
Okay, so that's just a short window of time. It's throwing me off because it says annual, so,
Well, we're trying to do it on an annual basis until
Okay.
we keep up, but the simple fact is, one half of your streets are asphalt will never catch up.
right,
It's just the way it is.
yeah.
It's the nature of the beast. So we plan to request additional help on an annual basis to assist us, because you also don't have a preventative maintenance plan with lift stations,
Yeah.
and valves and hydrants. So we're trying to focus our attention there, and to do that, we're going to have to start supplementing some of these maintenance demands with contract labor.
Okay. Now that makes sense. I just needed clarity on what it
Sure,
was asking
it makes
for.
sense too, and that's a good question. Number 5 is the EOC remodel and construction. I specifically asked for this. We've got some issues in the EOC room, so when we have a storm or a major event, we all go to the EOC. That's where we operate. Command and control is all together in the room. It makes for quicker decisions, and it runs 24 hours a day. But right now, we literally have to demob out of our office, mobilize in there, then mobilize back to our offices, and it's just not a good thing. So The 10,000 is for some remodeling construction we need to do in there to make permanent workstations, which he can use anyway, or, I'm sorry, Chief, can use anyway, even when we're not, excuse me, stand up the EOC. The room will be used anyway, and we're moving a door, and we're moving some wiring that's long since been dead and gone. And then number 6 is shipping containers, because Cliff made that mistake earlier. We're going to ship him off. Oh, wrong person.
Barrel work?
Yeah, the 26,000 is for shipping containers. When we remove the fuel tanks and the fuel island there.
Yeah, we talked about this, to store equipment, it would be a more feasible expense than a building and,
About a fourth of the cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
So he's determined that these 2 shipping containers will suffice and keep the equipment he needs to keep dry, will keep it dry and out of the sun.
It's kind of small potatoes compared to everything, but we're not purchasing these, are we? We're renting these.
No,
right?
we're buying.
Yeah. I mean, a container is temporary in my opinion. Number 1, and number 2 is I rent these, and it's about $150 a month. Might be a different option to just rent one. You can get them all day long for $150 a month. Shipping's about $400.
We'll check into it.
Can I ask just a little detailed question on rental of those shipping containers, because they're outdoors, I would imagine. What's the rental policy like if they degrade or become damaged?
They'll come replace it. I mean, you're renting it, so. I mean, and I've had good experiences with the ones I've rented in the past, so.
So we rental of 2 about $150 a month?
One's about $150 a month.
Okay.
Well, it depends on what size you get.
Yeah, these would be 40.
Yeah, 40, just give me a second.
Are you trying to put a roof over the middle of it too, right?
Well, we'd like to eventually. It might not be in the first year.
Oh, it's not budgeted in that?
Well, this is gonna
No.
be reconstruction of what we need to reconstruct to the bottom shop to make that shop more usable, and also concrete modifications to the existing slab to make sure that they're set on level surface.
I'm not sure where my manager rents these things from. I just know how much it is, but I just Googled something. It's shipped.com, $120 a month for a 40-foot container.
But that 26 isn't just those containers, though. That's the remodeling and
It's
the,
everything.
Concrete.
yeah, so it's a
Concrete
whole,
pad. There's,
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
not just the
And-
container cost.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah. That's
it's the modifications to get
yeah.
Make sure
sound
it's
place to
That's
place
because normally you
the
can buy those for like a
the
few
shop.
thousand a
Remember
piece.
how it floods because it goes down?
Water meter you have,
like 2 inch.
is that gonna be addressed with this?
No.
The service center holding water? No, we're just gonna keep letting it hold water? Okay.
That's why we're getting the container.
$175,000, I can fix you up.
Bought some rubber boots.
I was just wondering, that's
know-
always been ongoing.
We took a
Every
tour
time.
while it was raining.
It
What's the
holds
cost
water
on
all
just the
time.
containers, do you know?
Yeah,
We
just
got to see
the
the water.
containers. The initial quote I got were $2,400 plus freight shipping.
Yeah,
About
that's,
$2,900.
That's only 10 months.
yeah.
Yeah,
Call the ports, they may have some
Yeah,
down
we
there you can
could,
have.
we could.
Yeah.
release it after a year, we would purchase.
there's one over there off
Yeah.
220. That's it.
So it's cheaper to purchase than it is.
I think in the long run it would be. I think the rental is interesting, but like I say, in a year's time, you would have purchased one. If you expect it to last less than 5 years, then rental on
That's
two
a
would
long
probably
time.
be, but I think they're, hopefully we'll get a solid 10
I
years
think
out of
Mr.
it.
Challenger was probably thinking the 26 was just the container.
yeah.
Oh, okay. No, that is it. Yes.
Okay.
Right here.
So again, those are ranked in order of importance to staff. Those are our requests. Supplementals will not be plugged in until the budget is finalized and we see where our numbers are. We won't know that until the very end, then we'll bring these back to your final approval. But we did want you to see these up front and that these are the requests that are being made as far as supplementals go. We didn't have any last year. And then, next slide. So, as far as the budget impact items go, in looking forward, so council always wants to know, a look ahead. What are we looking for down the road maybe not so much this year, but in the next couple of years. So in 25, we had talked about, in fiscal year 25, salary survey and suggested to council for possible salary adjustments based on our region and our area around us. Elevated storage and possible well site, which we've discussed with council. Roughly 1.8 to 2 million, a new well north of 500,000. So these are rough numbers. In the next few years, not saying next year, but the next few years, 2.5 million. Combining lift stations 1 and 2, which both are undersized and underperforming now, roughly 2.4 million. That's the rehab and the combination of 1 and 2 together, and the new line going to the force mains. So from the lift station site to the force main, about 2.4. And new financial software in the future. Again, this is a very rough number. This is software that covers courts, it covers our financial software, and maybe a few other modules that can go along with it. Roughly 225,000, but I'd say that's low. But these are just rough numbers. So that's what we got right now. Looking forward for the next couple of years, is the council always wants to know, what big is out there. That's what's out there right now. Keep in mind, when we get our capital improvement plan back from the study, the CIP, the study they're doing right now, will provide even more guidance for this. And again, it's always better to have that engineering. We've got the engineering done, the study done on the elevated storage. Most of the work is already done on the combining 1 and 2, or at least the rough numbers, right?
Yeah, rough numbers.
Rough numbers on 1 and 2. So both of those have been looked at before. These aren't shovel ready, but they're thought out already. And the financial software, again, it's not a need yet, but it will be.
It was a need 5 years ago.
Yeah, we're beyond that now.
Well, my agreement on courts ended, and so we're just kind of at a point where
What are you using right now?
So
It's called Polaris.
Okay.
It's out of Utah.
We were there,
All the canned
last
reports
shift.
are in Utah here. I did a GFOA class on how to determine and how to go through the procurement process for making this software. And the examples I used of the really old archaic.
Was that one? Yeah.
But, in staff's defense, we utilize the software well now. It's taken several years to get there, but we do utilize it well. There's just a more efficient system out there. But so that said, we kind of gave you a rough presentation of the numbers, what we're looking at. Like I said, right now what we're waiting on is some insurance numbers. Chief, do you have anything on dispatch yet? Waiting on some numbers out of dispatch. I think that we might be a possible decrease there as well, hopefully. And then the revenue from the county. And that's what we're waiting on now. So what we'd like to do is bring this back to council once we get a little further along with those, and basically field any questions you have now.
I do want to follow up, Cliff. I feel I kind of got off a little bit. I'm not opposed to growing public works. I think that I'd rather us do it than, the way I kind of see it is we can go into mountains of debt and fix everything, or we can have you guys fix it for probably a lot less. But I don't want to jump the curb. I've been here. I've done that.
Yeah.
So maybe we could have a discussion on a little bit depth on it.
Yeah.
So.
And to be honest, I can't prove to you as Challenger or anybody on council any efficiency. I don't have an efficient way to track it. What I can tell you is I'm intimately involved in the daily operations, and these are things that they cannot do. Plain and simple. these things that you have to have done, because TCQ tells me I have to have done, I can't squeeze any more hours out of these guys. And that, I know it's not the best, but that's all I got. And that
I hear you.
is what it is, and it's not gonna get any better.
And we had looked, we took your guidance after the discussion last go around on we looked at some software that kind of would do a number of things, track equipment, track maintenance, utilize manpower, work orders, things of that nature, and looked at 5 or 6 different pieces of software that, you know, by municipal companies that do this for a living, and they all do 1 or 2 things really, really, really well, and the other 3 or 4 things that we need, they don't do really well. And I think the one software that I liked that we demoed was, do you recall the cost?
The initial cost is about 60 grand to get set up.
Yeah, it's cost prohibitive, but
If we were to pay a management company or a utility company separate, we would have the expectation that we get those work orders and we know, you know, what all's being worked on and how long it's taking and stuff like that. It's just the same thing.
sure.
Yeah,
So
I get you.
the expectation is the same, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yep. We haven't given up. We're still looking, but unfortunately got sidetracked by the other things since then, but we'll continue that effort. But
I guess
I just have to
the way
say
I
for the
look at it,
record,
though,
there's
is the-
billion-dollar companies who do these studies who can't get a number. I work for
yeah,
one.
and the way I look at it too
Commons
is
are-
like
can, though.
he's hired to do that.
They're
And I see him out there
incredibly
constantly,
incorrect.
day,
I
night,
can
middle of the night, everything else, and he's screaming and stomping his feet that he needs somebody else. You know, he's coming to you, you're sitting there seeing the same thing he is. I mean, I would kind of be like, if you came in my tackle store and told me, hey, why are you doing this, why are you selling this and that, and that? Well, first of all, you don't know it, why are you telling me that, you know? I was put in that position to do that, I have to trust that you're doing that in your position. And if the state mandates that you have to do certain things and you don't have the manpower to do it, I mean, who am I to tell you no? You know what I mean? It's the same thing when I was over in BWA, you know, when they're sitting there and the state's coming down and they're saying, hey, you have to do this, you have to do this. Well, it doesn't matter which way it's done, we've got to get it done. And if that means you need another person, I mean, by all means, I mean, I think that should be number 1 on this list right here. I mean, I understand road construction, all this other stuff. My street probably going to go under about a foot of water in the next couple of days, but, you know, without that guy right there, you're shorthanded. You know, you have that guy, and then you can help with all the rest of that stuff. And
well,
that's just mine.
I think what's most concerning to me, you know, looking at it from my point of view is I watch Cliff manage, and this is no dig on Cliff by any means. He's one man doing the best he can, but basically when I hear him make management decisions, his management decisions are made, what deadline is due and who can I put on it because that deadline is Friday.
Yeah, it's which fire is the biggest.
And then we get down to the routine maintenance items. It's scary to me to know we have fire plugs in this city that have not been opened in years. And that's a routine maintenance item in every city I've ever been in. We manually turn the plugs. Well, do you know what's going to happen when we start manually turning plugs?
Nothing.
They're gonna break.
They're going to break.
Everyone.
And then we're going to be out 15K.
Nothing meaning they're not going to work.
Yeah, they're going to be out 15K every one we break because they're welded shut with rust. So now these we pay for the sins of others. We're going to go back and we're going to start doing these preventative maintenance items and realize, oh my God, they've never been PM'd at all. We're going to snap the valve off of it and close. Go, hey, I need a new plug here. I need a plug there. Well, they're $6 grand, $5 grand.
Yeah, it's getting close to that. Yeah.
You know, for everyone that's broken, we don't know whether they work or not. And so when we realize, you know, as a staff, we're saying we realize there's a problem there, and we want to fix the problem, but we can't fix the problem.
Well, and this is in direct response. I want council to understand, this request alone was in direct response from the advice I got from TCEQ during an investigation. So this is something they told me I had to do. And this additional labor we're asking for to serve one person, one purpose and one purpose alone. It's water distribution, valves, hydrants, and those are the metrics. And that's what we want to determine what we're covering to be able to feed back to you as a council, because they say your distribution system, if you own one, it has to work. So hopefully we can build upon this personnel, but we think at this point in time, if they have 4 to 5 years before they can even make one round to get you that solid answer. And that's an estimate. I guess another metric that can be considered when we did the salary study for the city of Richwood. Texas A&M did it for us first. We were required to go back and redo it. And throughout the 8 partnering cities, or cities that were about our size, our same dynamic, as close as we could get to tax-based water customers, so on and so forth, the average connection per operator ratio is about 265 connections per operator. City of Richwood is almost 500.
That was one of the factors whenever we increased it to, I don't know if it was 11, but it was over, it still wasn't enough, and I think it's the most we ever had. I think it was the most we ever had, and it was not enough. And during Harvey, this man was the one who was out, and every time I call to have service, the director of the department should not be knee-deep in shit. Every time there's an emergency, having to deal with this water and this, like, he shouldn't have to be in there.
I thought it was normal.
No.
That's why he has such nice skin.
And just to be clear,
He never
I'm
gets sick.
completely agreeing with you.
It's-
Like,
I know.
you need that person sooner than later. Like,
I want to be able to show council, I understand what you're saying, I appreciate it well, I want to be able to show council, Ms. Challenger, what you're asking. Yeah, that particular request is just, I don't know if I'll be able to show you enough information to convince you, other than the simple facts of what I told you. And Pat, beyond that, I'm the problem, because I can't milk more out of these guys, and if that's the issue, that can be dealt with as well. But, and that's not a threat or anything, I'm just saying, I'm to the point now, I've tried my best with the resources I have over the past half decade, I can't make it work. And as we continue to grow population, I'm not going to be able to make it work.
well, it's not like you're asking for 3 just general hands to work. You're asking for a specific person for a specific purpose for a mandated task.
And they're not even that easy to find or train, and they're not cheap.
No, what we did before we did this, council, is we looked at the city as a whole. And we looked at what positions are needed. And we shaved a position. And we took that position, which is already budgeted and already funded, and gave it to Cliff. But even then, it's a lot like the North Water Plant. It's a lot like storage, water storage, and everything else. We buy these items or we fix these items and we think, oh my goodness, we're good to go. No, you're at par. And we're still
Behind the 8 ball, still.
we're still below par over here.
Subpar, no.
We just haven't looked under the hood.
And that's why it's number 1. If we don't do any of the other supplementals, I'm sorry, number 2.
Then he's
Number
number
1's Misty Court, because we've already promised it. But this is just to meet TCEQ standards, and I don't even know if that's going to do it, to be honest with you.
I just want to, I just want to add, I know you said you wanted something tangible to prove productivity or time on tools or whatever you want to call it. There's 1,000 names for it, but I think I don't believe it's a responsible use of city funds to do any such study. When you can look at your reports on a weekly basis and see pictures of people out there at 2 o'clock in the morning fixing shit that's broken. And, the response time to things that break in the city is incredible for the amount of people that you have. And I just wanted to say that for the record, that I don't think there's value added in any such study.
I mean, it's just an Excel spreadsheet, though. that you
No, it
gotta-
isn't. It's time and
It's
money
sitting on
that
my
it costs.
phone. I've got it on my phone.
Then
from
why
my
haven't you
company.
done it if it's so easy?
I guess not.
I mean-
Let's focus,
I
guys.
mean, that was weird.
To kind of
Well-
reiterate that, I think
It's time and money, and you're
Yeah,
arguing
the
with me that it's
position.
not, and it is. It costs money to get that study, and it's a waste of money.
I was,
Has there ever been a time you've needed services in this city and you haven't got it? I don't
Well,
think anyone can
I'll tell
say
you this
yes.
much, I've had a company for 17 years and brought it through 3 recessions. Somehow.
Have you ran a city?
No.
Exactly.
All
They're
right,
different.
guys, let's focus on this. It's getting late. People are
I'll say one thing before
itchy.
we go. Looking at over, I could say, in my mind, and I know, and I can say that, yeah, it's a justified need. It needs to be there. To kind of take myself out of it, if I was on the outside looking in, I can understand Mr. Challenger's request there in that, how do you justify this? Because if you look at numbers and you look at things like that, it's a different aspect, being able to justify it to somebody that's on the outside that has never seen a public works guy or seen what they do. They're going to ask, well, why are we spending this money to do that? Well, it's kind of hard to explain because they're not in it. So I think it is something to continue to look at as to how do you, track those work orders and track those jobs. I can speak to my experience in what I do. We have a shop where I work, and we have labor that works in there, and they have like work orders, and they have to fill out, okay, this is what I did. It's a little bit tedious, but it's one of those things we have to do. And that's kind of how we track, what was done, what parts were used, and things of that nature. I don't know what software's out there. I haven't gotten that far into it.
There's several options.
You know,
It's not cost prohibitive as.
Yeah,
Eric was saying.
exactly. And that's just something I think we'll have to look at in the future. I think it could be a good tool for even you. I don't know the people that work for you. I haven't met them. So is somebody doing?
We were actually pumped at the notion.
Right.
We were ready to show you.
I think it would benefit
10%.
you because you know what your guys are doing, you know who's doing it, not doing it.
I
Comes
think-
time for evals and stuff like that, it helps. So, I mean, it's just
I
something
think
to keep on the
building
table.
on that, and I too agreed with Mike when he brought it up last time. And I think looking at it as a whole, and there are several benefits to this, and the one that I really like the best, it would help Cliff a lot because it also has inventory control, cost control. It has project manipulation inside of it. There's a lot of things it can do. Like for instance, when we say we did 200 repairs last year, we can tell you a rough estimate of what we did on those 200 repairs. But with this specific software, we can say that valve replacement cost us X, mainline replacement cost us X, inventory cost us X. And I think it's a small price to pay. We have fund balance. I think we can do this. My suggestion to council is, let's do it. I'll bring you the price, bring you what it is, but there are benefits just manpower control. But at any given council meeting, if Mike were to ask, hey, I saw your guys down at 2004, and I saw them working on that repair, and there were 5 of your guys down there. What are they doing? Cliff can go push a button and say that was a water main break, cost us $13,500 in manpower, inventory, and equipment usage. It does all of that. For a city our size, that's phenomenal.
It's kind of like
Here's a question I have for that though. Mr. Challenger was asking about like efficiency. And for anybody that's ever done any type of major construction or anything like that, or mechanical work, they run off of these things called like MAC charts. Somebody sitting behind a computer somewhere who knows so much more says, his guys are going to go out and change this valve. It's going to take 2 guys 4 hours. Now, we all know down here in this environment, this ground, this water, everything else, That's not a 2-hour change. They're gonna dig it up, it's gonna be seized up, they're gonna have to cut, weld. That 2-hour job is actually gonna take those guys 6 to 8 hours. So when you plug it into that system, the efficiency is gonna say, these guys are sitting there eating more than they're working. Does that make sense? Because those systems don't have those things built into it to sit there and accommodate for those needs.
This one in particular requires your data to build that time. So it will know, as you input your data, it will have zero.
But you're not talking about a productivity study.
No.
You're talking about work order management. Those are two separate
Yeah.
things.
But it will also,
Yeah.
show your manpower time.
It will, as a,
Yeah, and it also.
as an
Byproduct
afterthought.
of
Exactly.
It'll
using
give
it,
you-
yes.
It'll give
Not
you further
necessarily percentage
documentation in the
number.
future, if you need, additional.
It's similar to
personnel.
police and fire's call
It'll really help with like
logs that show how many calls they get and how many
Correct.
services
Between
they
We
It's a
can't
perform.
do anything
tracking,
similar
it's
to that,
not
to the
a
mapping
study
thing
to
that we
see
got?
how efficient they are.
Reporting will be just.
But it does handle
Correct.
a little bit, but it just tells you, it gives you historical, or the life of the system. So that might cover, as we manage those maps over the next 5-7 years, you'll catch some bits and pieces which we feel
Yeah.
need to be noted within those maps, but a service line replacement, we won't note anything like that, or probably a million other things that might take an hour to 10,
So this is a future agenda item that we're discussing right now?
We'll put it with the supplementals.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll add it there then.
Any other questions?
I think we're all.
We got
there.
time.
We've got plenty of time.
Pizza.
But this is, what tonight is for y'all. And again, I know that it's important to have your input, to have your guidance, and to know what is in your minds as we speak through these processes. It's not easy. It's not going to be easy going forward, but I think we brought a good budget as it stands so far.
Last thing I'll ask is on the maintenance and repair, is it built into the budget? Like, when we have these water main breaks, we've been having a lot of them lately, so it's kind of, seems like we're spending money left and right all the time.
Yeah, we have.
Is all that kind of,
We have an M&R line item, we adjusted a lot based on historicals.
yeah,
We can foresee some of it, specifically what you're talking about, with the drought condition stuff, and we do for water and sewer have an M&R line item.
okay.
And if we go beyond that, Jeremy, we do a budget amendment, but as long as the fund itself is not over the
Right,
limit,
right.
we're good. But yes, we do fluctuate those budgets a lot, depending
I
on.
don't think I have ever been. I think I've kept-
Well, there's always a first.
Thanks,
I
Cliff.
just that.
And then we'll bring you back when we get the insurance numbers and all that, because I know that's a discussion we need to have as well, but we just can't get the budget, the insurance numbers until they get all the quotes back. But it's gonna be expensive. We've had, again, playing on the themes, we've had another employee out, will be a year, and probably 6 to 12 months before he comes back. So we had workers' comp, yeah. And then windstorm, we're paying for all of the storms that have
Everywhere
hit
else.
historically, yeah. So, but other than that, that's what we got. No questions?
One last thing. On I'll say this because we've had 2 positions open for PD, and like nobody's applying there or anything. Is it pay's not enough, or what, or do we need to look?
We discussed that with Chief, and we think we've got a bit of a workaround on that. We were advertising the bare minimum, and Chief has discretion within a hiring range, and I think he's gonna publish the whole hiring range
Okay.
instead of the bare minimum. That said, who wants to be a cop right now? I mean, I'm a 30-plus year cop. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
But I'm a 30-year cop, and if I had to
But
do
I
it,
didn't up and.
if I had to do it again, I wouldn't do it again.
If I didn't have so much time invested over there,
and retire before 60, I would definitely come to work for this man right here.
So you're saying you'll come when you're 60?
There you go.
Take
Before I'm
retirees.
60.
So you're saying there's a chance?
There's a
Maybe we can get talking about.
The bailiff.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
That caused y'all too many problems.
but
Night court.
I do appreciate that question, and yes,
didn't
salary
mean it
probably
like
does
that.
figure into a little bit of that. So I think we helped Chief maybe find a workaround of that. But again, we made the commitment that we were gonna do the salary survey in '25. So you don't really wanna get in the habit of chasing salaries every year. That's just not a good, it's not a good sight. So when we do a salary survey, we committed to 25, and it's a salary survey from the top to the bottom. So when we'll bring that back in your FY '26, will be that. Also 26 is our, will be COLA and merit on top of that, so we'll figure all of that in as well. So, be a big year.
We haven't done one since 2019.
Yeah,
Trying to pay everybody.
time to get paid.
Is that all?
That's it.
That's it, Mayor.
All right. Moving on to the city manager's report.
Everything's pretty much the same as last Friday, I'm sorry. The only thing I would like to bring up is our medians have finally started to be mowed. Thank goodness.
By text dot?
Yep. Also, yes, by text dot, not by us.
Okay.
Also, yeah, I'm sure you've all heard about the weather. We briefed with staff. Storm drains are being cleaned, generators fueled, made ready. All weather slides have been shared with staff and the fire department, so I think we're good to go. Looking at the last spaghetti models, I don't think we're going to be impacted by anything significant. Just some rainfall, but we'll keep staff informed and council informed as the week goes on. And Will's over here looking at his weather radar now. That's all I got.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Stallberg, do you have anything to add?
To touch on the weather, yeah, first and foremost, everybody be careful with it. If y'all know of anybody, or if y'all need help, or know anybody that needs help prepping, or after, somebody takes on a foot of water at their house or whatever, I'm more than willing to help out. So just let them know. Other than that, I'm good.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Challenger?
Well, thanks for this presentation. It was excellent. I really appreciate everything. And just to kind of follow up on Eric's presentation, I obviously don't know what's going to happen, but an economic collapse is a process, not an event. And if something's going to collapse, from my opinion, if you see that something is happening, the first thing to do is to lighten the load. I don't know if it would fix it, but I know that that's the first thing that you're supposed to do. And the burden is high on us, the people, outside of the government. The burden of everything from inflation to housing costs to taxes to everything, the burden is heavy. And I think that what we should be doing is working together to lighten the load wherever we can while we get through this time. That's what I feel like sharing.
Lighten the load. Thank you, sir. That's all? Okay. Councilmember Reynolds, anything to add?
Yeah, just to add a little bit to what Paul said, for your storm/hurricane, whatever prep. One thing that a lot of people forget is pets, preparations and accommodations for your pets. Now's a good time to get all your vaccination records, medications refilled, all those things that you need, should you have to evacuate or board your pet somewhere or go to a hotel or something. So just a reminder for everyone out there.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Yerson, you're up.
Just say it was a good presentation. Everybody had everything lined out. Eric, Trish, Cliff, everything was pretty well explained. I appreciate what all y'all do for us. I know it takes quite a while to put this together, and y'all got many more hours in it. So I appreciate it, and it's very enlightening.
All right, thank you, sir. Councilmember Fountain.
Just to kind of reiterate what Will was saying there, thanks to the staff and to everybody for the presentation. And I know we still got a ways to go, and we'll get it knocked out. So looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you all for your input.
Thank you.
That was next. I was going to greatly thank you for your
Throw
input.
your thunder there.
You're late. Thank you for your input from prior year stuff. Thank you, council, for being here for this. Thank you, department heads, for everything. It took a lot of y'all to do this, so it's appreciated. And like everybody said, just be prepared. I don't think we're going to have too much weather out of this, but weathermans can always be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't get paid for my job, they do up here. So other than that, that's all I have. We have a future agenda item for Cliff stuff. Oh, I thought it was a
No.
efficient.
We'll bring it back part of the budget.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just a reminder on the next meetings, CIAC will be June 8th, council June 8th, or the 15th.
July.
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 I'm sorry, I'm speaking of July, but I'm saying June. So July 8th for council and capital improvements, and then the 15th will be another budget meeting. So just make sure y'all have 2 meetings on the books next month.
KRB meet next month?
KRB will meet on the 2nd.
So 3 for you.
No community?
What days are those
Are any of
meetings?
these for us?
Both Mondays?
8th is our
8th
normal
and
meeting.
The 2nd of August?
The 15th is an additional meeting that's in your budget calendar.
These all will be.
So you can hear all these days.
Is that it?
4. And then all these.
Yep.
Time is now 9:19 p.m. with no other business to discuss. This meeting is adjourned.
Sometime, I was just waiting till 4. That's what I was. You did good.